Chapter 1023. Although everything was under Her Majesty's control, and it was even the result of Her Majesty's deliberate actions, Wuxia could not suppress the hatred in his heart when he thought of the assassin choosing to assassinate on Her Majesty's birthday. How could he not be? Just a little more, and both of them would die. He wished he could bear the risk for her. The person who led the Red Lotus group to obstruct Her Majesty was not anyone else. It was the fish that escaped the net, that Her Majesty had accidentally missed when she attacked the northern borderline and slaughtered the nobles there. Wuxia was personally in charge of the interrogation, so he was very clear about the person's background. He was the grandson of the wise Wu Liba. Calculating the time, this person was only 9 or 10 years old. As he was thinking, the tent was forcefully opened by Fu Wang. Military Counselor Wei is really amazing. The old man who served Wu Liba confessed. When Wu Liba was 16, he really got a shepherd girl pregnant and gave birth to an illegitimate daughter to be raised by an old minister of the family. Later, Wu Liba secretly married her to a branch of the royal family. Fu Wang walked too hastily, his breathing was slightly hurried, and his forehead was covered in sweat. Although it was a branch of the royal family, it was just an illegitimate child of the king of the northern borderline. So there was no record of this person in the royal family. I almost missed this family. Wuxia asked coldly, "Have you caught the person?" Fu Wang grinned. He said, "When we sent people over, their family was about to escape. The few adults in the family saw that they could not escape and committed suicide. But didn't the military counselor say that they had a boy in their family? So we searched carefully. He looked like he was only 10 years old, but he was silly and did not have the aura of a master of resurgence." "What about the child?" Wuxia asked. "If this child was not killed, he would become a big problem in the future. Bring him here." Fu Wang shouted towards the outside, and a soldier brought in a little fatty who was tied up tightly. Wuxia narrowed his eyes slightly, got up and walked to the little fat boy. He raised his hand and pinched his chin, carefully examining him. "It's not this child. This child is fake." Wuxia said with certainty. He was really replaced. Fu Wang was shocked. "This is not true? The son of a servant. He doesn't look noble at all. His parents are slaves. How could he be the person CI is looking for?" Wuxia had seen that fish that slipped through the net in his previous life. Even though the face of a 20-year-old youth and a 10-year-old child was different, it was impossible for there to be no similarities. Looking at this person's face, the past few generations of his family had been poor and lowly. It was impossible for him to be Wu Liba's grandson. Fu Wang's face darkened. "Really?" Wuxia said, "We'll know after interrogating this fellow." Fu Wang drew his sword and placed it on the fatty's neck, purposely intimidating him. Sure enough, the little fatty gave himself away. "Damn it!" Fu Wang's face turned green. His subordinates did not take their work seriously. As expected, he had to do it himself. He led a group of people to chase after them. After following the clues for more than 2 hours, they finally found the person hiding in a latrine pit in the wild. The latrine pit in the wild was not deep and was about the height of an adult. Fu Wang had never thought that the main character would be hiding here. What a scary fellow. No wonder he's that old bastard Wu Liba's grandson. That latrine pit was full of maggots and flies. Seeing that we went over to search, the fellow jumped in and hid there. He's not afraid of drowning in the feces. He's so calm at such a young age. It's really scary. Fu Wang returned close to dusk. He said to Wuxia, "That fellow is too smelly. Let the military advisor take a look at him after washing him." Wuxia said coldly, "He's someone who's about to die anyway. His corpse will rot eventually. There's no need to wash him." Fu Wang said, "Even so, we can't let him stink the military advisor." The ancients were still very afraid of ghosts and gods. Although Fu Wang did not believe in this, he would not make presumptuous judgments about things he did not know. No matter what, Wuxia's little demonstration of his skills made Fu Wang feel a little more respect for him. "I'll go take a look." Wuxia, accompanied by Fu Wang, went to see the fish that slipped through the net. Although the fish that slipped through the net was only 10 years old, his appearance was already beginning to show. He had a handsome face and deep eyes. Wuxia looked at him as if he could see through time and see the young man who was tied up in the dungeon. To be honest, if not for their different standpoints, Wuxia would have quite admired him. To this day, Wuxia still remembered what the young man said before he committed suicide. The traitor Lu massacred the people of the northern borderline. How many children who were crying piteously for food lost their birth parents? How many lonely old people lost their blood relatives? Millions of people, all died under her butcher knife. I just wanted to let her die with 2 lives. Whether it was in the previous life or this life, Her Majesty was the enemy of the northern borderline. But, how could Her Majesty be the one who caused the situation in the northern borderline? Wei Xi looked at the young man's corpse that fell to the ground and muttered to himself, "It's clearly chaotic times. Her Majesty just used her own method to end the chaotic times. She used the sacrifice of a few people in exchange for the peace of the world." If the young man really succeeded, the newly established Jiang dynasty would collapse, and chaos might even reappear. At that time, Chongqing was only 5 or 6 years old. Once Her Majesty died, how could Chongqing carry the country? What would become of the originally balanced court? However, Wei Xi would not let the regrets of the previous life reappear. The child in front of him had to die. Perhaps sensing Wei Xi's murderous intent, the child's brown eyes emitted intense hatred and murderous intent, like a young lone wolf. The child's breathing was slightly stagnant. He asked Wei Xi in not very fluent Chinese, "You want to kill me?" Wei Xi nodded. He raised his right hand and the soldier beside him handed him his sword. "What?" the child asked again. "To cut the weeds and eliminate the roots," Wei Xi said softly. "Do I need any other reason?" To the child, Jiang Pingji had killed almost all of his relatives. He could already remember, and it was impossible for him to forget. This blood feud would not end until one of them died. The child's face was deathly pale. After a while he felt the blood in his entire body turn cold. His body collapsed with a crash and his blood dyed the soil beneath him. Wei Xi felt unprecedentedly relaxed as he sheathed his sword. Because of the previous example, Fu Wang was even more cautious in his work, and he completed the task Jiang Pingji gave him perfectly. "You killed someone with your own hands?" When Jiang Pingji learned of this, she did not care about the child's identity. Instead, she was concerned about the hidden reasons behind Wei Xi's actions. "That child will be a hidden danger if we keep him. It's better to get rid of him as soon as possible." Jiang Pingji frowned and said, "Just kill him. Why do you have to do it yourself?" Wei Xi said, "Mercy doesn't kill people." Jiang Pingji said, "Could it be that the child is a demon?" Wei Xi said, "What I kill is the demon in my heart." After killing the child with his own hands, Wei Xi truly felt that he could change the established future. Jiang Pingji was speechless. It was not until late autumn that Jiang Pingji completely conquered the entire northern borderline and annihilated all the nobles there. Just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief and enjoy the new year, she received a letter from Huang Song. Chapter 1024. A letter from Governor Huang? Could it be from the Mengs? Li Yun recalled the contents of the alliance between Huang Song and them. His heart tightened. Although the Mengs of Zhangzhou are strong, it won't be easy for them to take advantage of Huang Song. Qiguan Rang fanned the feather fan in his hand, a cold smile on his lips. The light in his eyes seemed to be able to see through souls. Huang Song's letter has a deep meaning. Sun Wen, who was sitting beside him, felt the warmth being blown away by the cold wind. The old man furrowed his brows and secretly moved his mat to the side. He finally understood why Feng Zhen and Wei Xi were unwilling to sit beside Qiguan Rang. The northern borderline was remote and the winter was colder than the central plains. It was late autumn, and everyone wished they could carry a hot water pot in their hands, a charcoal basin in their arms, and wrap themselves in warm clothes. Who would use a feather fan to fan themselves in this season? Haha, unfortunately the person beside him was that weirdo. Even though Sun Wen appeared calm, his brows twitched along with the rhythm of Qiguan Rang's fanning. He seemed to be enduring something. Everyone's attention was on Qiguan Rang. Only the audience sympathized with Sun Wen. Zabayako, haha, I feel cold even through the screen. Master Qiguan really didn't do it on purpose? Dusk Sunset, I don't know if it was on purpose. I only know that Master Qiguan ruined the phrase feather fan and silk cloth. Every time I read this phrase, I always think of Master Qiguan standing in the snow and ice, smiling and fanning himself. Wei Wei Chun Feng, to the one above, that's enough. Just thinking about that image makes me stick a few more heat pats. Occasionally holding a fan and pretending to be profound is pretentious and classy. Fanning yourself in the middle of winter is considered crazy. However, even if he was crazy, Qiguan Rang was still a Prince Charming. The audience laughed and chatted, but the atmosphere in the main tent was not so relaxed. It was like a lump of thick ink that could not be melted, making one feel strangely suffocated. Meaning? Military advisor Qiguan, I really can't tell. What meaning can there be in this? Li Yun read Huang Song's letter repeatedly. The first half was about greeting his lord and reminiscing about old times. The second half was a brief mention of the situation on the battlefield. Jiang Pingji formed an alliance with Huang Song so that the rear would not have any worries. The latter would help her stall the Meng family in Sangzhou. Qiguan Rang sneered, "Commandant Li, do you really think that Governor Huang is so useless?" The lord had already taken control of the northern borderline. Huang Song had many advisors under his command, but they couldn't do anything to the Meng family of Zhangzhou. Li Yun thought about it carefully and said, although Governor Huang controls the land of a prefecture, Haozhou has only recently escaped from the chaos of war. In terms of wealth and military strength, Haozhou cannot compete with Zhang Prefecture. Prefecture Magistrate Huang delayed the Meng family for his lord, preventing the Meng family's army from entering the northern borderline. Yun thought that was their limit. Now that Prefecture Governor Huang's army is running low on provisions, it's normal for him to seek help from the lord. Qiguan Rang was about to speak when Jiang Pingji, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly interrupted. When did Bogeo become a prefecture overseer? Before the war at Beijiang, Huang Song had been a county governor. The officials in the tent, "My lord, you've missed the point," Wei Ci said. "A few months ago the former Haozhou magistrate passed away due to illness. His sons were incompetent and none of them could inherit his father's position. His sons jointly recommended Huang Song, and Huang Song offered 100,000 dong of provisions to the imperial court. The young emperor was very pleased and agreed to this matter, appointing Huang Song as the new Haozhou magistrate. When Huang Song was promoted, Jiang Pingji and the northern borderline were in a heated battle. How could she have the time to care about this matter? Jiang Pingji smacked her lips and a smile hung on her face. After all, which son doesn't want to inherit his father's family business? The position of Haozhou's prefecture magistrate didn't fall into the hands of his sons. Instead it was taken by Huang Song. It would be a joke to say that his sons did it willingly. In troubled times, the one with the bigger fist had the final say. Huang Song's power spread throughout the entire Haozhou. If the position of prefecture magistrate fell into someone else's hands, Huang Song would be done for. Speaking of this, Jiang Pingji suddenly thought of a detail. Bogeo offered 100,000 dong of provisions to the imperial court as a tribute? 100,000 dong of provisions was not a small amount, but it wasn't a lot either. For an ordinary army, 100,000 dong of provisions could last them for a while, but for the imperial court, it was just a drop in the bucket. Not to mention anything else, the salaries of the imperial court officials were huge food consumers. 100,000 dong of provisions wouldn't take long. Fengzhen laughed. I heard that the young emperor in Qinzhou is having a hard time. He owes the officials several months of salaries, and there are huge gaps in his expenses. Without the 100,000 dong of provisions that Magistrate Huang offered as a tribute, I'm afraid the young emperor wouldn't even be able to afford his morning porridge. The royal family of Dongqing was now only an empty shell. Qinzhou is rich in resources and the people are rich. How can it not even provide for the daily expenses of the imperial court? Jiang Pingji hadn't paid attention to the news of the royal family for a long time. After the Huangshui meeting, the royal family was afraid that the feudal lords would seize their power, so they schemed against each other. Jiang Pingji left early with her people and focused on developing her own territory. After so many years, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but sigh when she heard that the royal family was in such a miserable state. The young emperor is young and ignorant. He doesn't know the hardships of the people. The Empress Dowager is the regent. She has illicit relationships with many ministers in private. She only thinks about enjoying herself all day long. How could she have the time to rectify the affairs of the imperial court? In the long run, even 10 Qinzhou wouldn't be able to withstand such extravagance, let alone 1 Qinzhou. Fengzhen laughed. Moreover, before the fake emperor withdrew from Qinzhou, he plundered the wealth of the people. Qinzhou is no longer as prosperous as it once was. The fake emperor retreated after plundering, leaving only a dilapidated Qinzhou for the royal family. The young emperor was young and ignorant. The Empress Dowager was in the prime of her life. The mother was strong and the son was weak. The Empress Dowager was in charge of state affairs, but she didn't have any talent. She only knew how to enjoy herself and spend without restraint. It was expected that Qinzhou, which had already suffered a great loss of vitality, would end up in such a poor and weak state. Jiang Pingji tapped her fingers on the table and narrowed her eyes. Qinzhou. It's a waste of resources in the hands of the royal family. It was good enough that the royal family could gather 20,000 to 30,000 troops. Most of them were old, weak, sick or disabled. How could they guard the huge Qinzhou? Feng Zhen said, "You're not the only one who thinks like you, my lord. It's just that no one dares to stand out." The royal family was dilapidated, but it was still the royal family. If they wanted to take Qinzhou, they would have to destroy the royal family. That meant tearing apart the last layer of Dongqing's fig leaf. The feudal lords were afraid that they would become the target of public criticism. Therefore, during the Huangshui meeting, none of the feudal lords dared to covet Qinzhou. But now, the situation was different. Jiang Pingji put the matter of Qinzhou aside and changed the topic to the core of the meeting. Just now Han Mei asked. Wenjing hasn't given an answer. The corner of Qiguan Rang's mouth twitched. If his lord hadn't interjected and changed the topic to such a remote place, would Qiguan Rang have dragged it out and not answered? Qiguan Rang said, "Commander Li has underestimated Magistrate Huang's ability." Chapter 1025. Jiang Pingji smiled and agreed. That's true. Bogeo's power isn't as great as the Mengs of Cangzhou, but it's not to the extent that he can't handle it. She had fought the northern borderline for 11 months, and Huang Song and the Mengs of Cangzhou had also been in a stalemate for 11 months. Although she didn't understand the situation on the battlefield, Jiang Pingji believed that Huang Song wouldn't lose to the Mengs. Although the Mengs of Cangzhou are strong, they can't withstand a prolonged battle. Moreover, the Mengs controlled Cangzhou by force and are militaristic. They are already a spent force. Bogeo is a smart man. His strategists are difficult to deal with. It's impossible for him not to see the weakness of the Mengs of Cangzhou. In other words, Bogeo only needs to defend the city walls, block the checkpoints and not attack. The Mengs will suffer losses just by delaying the battle. Jiang Pingji smiled faintly. Her words were full of affirmation for Huang Song. If the Mengs send troops to attack, Bogeo won't be defeated. Huang Song really couldn't beat the Mengs of Cangzhou in a head-on battle. If it was just delaying the main force of the Mengs, Huang Song should be able to handle it with ease. However, Huang Song sent an urgent letter when Jiang Pingji had just taken care of the northern borderline. Thinking of this, Jiang Pingji's eyes flashed with coldness, and the corners of her lips curled up. Qiguan Rang bowed and said, "My lord is wise." A few civil officials were deep in thought. Their expressions were solemn. The generals followed the crowd and lowered their heads, pretending to be thinking. If one looked closely at their eyes, they would find that they were slightly confused. They obviously didn't understand. Towards this, the generals expressed their bitterness in their hearts. There was a group of highly intelligent people in the tent. As ordinary people, they were very stressed. Not only did the generals express that they didn't understand, but the audience in the streaming room also urgently called for the big shots. They urgently needed a big shot who was the representative of the language class for this segment that required brains. Otherwise, it would be like listening to a book from heaven. After many calls, a big shot finally appeared. Their bullet screens were also manually blocked by the idle people. Lao Ciji Lianming, I'm glad I didn't miss today's streaming. Seeing Huang Song's letter, I have a feeling that it's finally happening. Thinking back to the past, the host and Huang Song were still a bunch of scoundrels who went to the brothel to drink wine together. They were good brothers, but now they were plotting against each other. Qiguan Rang had said that Huang Song's letter had a hidden meaning. I was stunned for a long time before I understood what he meant. This letter wasn't a conspiracy, but it was an open and above-board plot. The target of the plot was the host. Why did he say that? Judging from the conversation of the streamer and the others, Huang Song could not defeat the Meng family, but the Meng family could not do anything to Huang Song either. Huang Song did not need help at all. However, Huang Song still wrote a letter? What? Because he couldn't let the host have any room for further development. Gui Kai Guofengxiu, we saw it too. The streamer has just finished fighting in Beijiang. Although she won all the way, it wasn't easy. For this battle, the host had almost exhausted all of her family's assets. After fighting for almost 11 months, she could be said to have turned out in full force. There was a saying in Sun Tzu's Art of War that was very true. In war, victory was the most important, not the most important. What he meant was that the most important thing in a war was to win it quickly and not to prolong it. The streamer has just taken over the northern borderline, and the people's hearts are still unsettled. The subsequent investment in governance is an astronomical figure, and the expenditure is no less than the investment in war. If she didn't handle it well, the Beijiang might rebound. Under such circumstances, it was really inappropriate for the host to continue fighting. Huang Song's request for help was actually throwing the enemy, who had not consumed much of their troops, to the host. If the war with the Meng family started, guess how long it would last? This was an open and above-board way to force the host to be militaristic. In Yueja Zhuge Qinma, I really underestimated Huang Song in the past. This guy doesn't make any moves, but once he does, he makes people fall. This was an open and above-board plot. The host had dug a hole in front of her. She had to jump in even if she didn't want to. No matter what Huang Song's plan was, it was an indisputable fact that he helped the host to contain the Meng family's troops, so that the Meng family could not sneak attack the host from behind. Now that Huang Song had sent a letter asking for help, the host had no reason to refuse to send troops. No matter who won or lost, Huang Song could advance or retreat freely. Dense bullet screens floated in front of the eyes. Many of the audience saw the analysis of the big shots and felt a chill. Xiong Ben Papa gets dressed. This conspiracy theory is really scary. Did Huang Song really plot against the host? Yen Ho Ji Yuan, scratching my head. If I transmigrated, I feel that I wouldn't survive more than 3 episodes. Even Huang Song is so shrewd. How can transmigrators survive? When I saw Huang Song's letter, my first reaction was to send troops to suppress the Meng family. I didn't expect there to be so many tricks behind it. Host, why don't you send troops? Mo Lanji, it's impossible not to send troops. If you don't send troops, the host is really finished. Huang Song and Jiang Pingji formed an alliance. Not only did he shed all pretense of cordiality with the Meng family, but he also sent troops to help her contain the Meng family's troops for free. Now that Huang Song was in an emergency, Jiang Pingji was unwilling to send troops to help. If word got out, Jiang Pingji would immediately become the public enemy. It was precisely because she had no other choice that it was an open plot. It's too early to make a conclusion. Jiang Pingji broke the almost frozen atmosphere in the tent. She smiled and said, Bogeo sent a letter, so there must be a change in the war situation. He got involved because of me. Now that the northern borderline has been destroyed, there's no reason to let Bogeo continue to fight alone. She was determined to win Sangzhou. Sangzhou was the largest horse farm in Dongqing. Countless war horses were bred there. This place was of great strategic significance and was a must-win for the military. Even if it was Huang Song, Jiang Pingji didn't want to give up this piece of cake. Huang Song had his own plans and so did she. It was just a matter of who was more skillful. Lord, Qiguan Rang frowned deeply as if he wanted to say something. They had just conquered the northern borderline. If they rashly sent troops, their foundation would be unstable and others would take advantage of it. I know what Wenjing is worried about, Jiang Pingji said calmly. I also want to cultivate and recuperate. The current situation doesn't allow us to do so. If we don't send troops, perhaps the Sangzhou horse farm will change its surname to Huang. At that time, Bogeo will control Haozhou and Sangzhou, then he will surround and take Qinzhou. If we are more ruthless, Bogeo will ally with the Su family from Zhe County, and we will become a dead end. Jiang Pingji's forces were all in the north. Now that she had conquered the northern borderline, it seemed powerful, but further south was the territory of Huang Song and the Su brothers. In other words, if Jiang Pingji wanted to expand further, she couldn't overcome these two forces. If she cultivated and recuperated, it was tantamount to giving the two families a chance to develop. It was better to take a risky move. Perhaps she could revitalize the whole chessboard. Moreover, Jiang Pingji's fingers played with the flame of the lamp on the table. Her eyes reflected the light of the fire. She said leisurely, in the battle at the northern borderline, we didn't lose much of our troops. Even if we fought with the Meng family from Sangzhou, it was far from the level of militarism. She was tired after fighting at the northern borderline, but her muscles and bones weren't injured. Most of her strength was still there. She still had the strength to fight again. Chapter 1026. Lang Jun is back. Zhu Qingning was embroidering in the hall. Hearing the servant's greeting, she quickly stood up to welcome him. Before she could take 2 steps, her Lang Jun had already stepped forward and stopped her. Why are you so careful? Nye Sun's lips curled up slightly. His bright smile made the cinnabar between his eyebrows as red as blood. He said, Wunyang has 2 bodies now. If anything goes wrong, won't you kill me? Zhu Qingning blushed and said in annoyance, Oh, I was wondering why you treat me so well. It turns out that it's because of my belly. Nye Sun did not panic in the face of this fatal question. Instead, he helped Zhu Qingning back to the main hall. Wunyang's words hurt. It's obvious that you love me so much that you value the child in your belly. You are all my treasures. I feel bad if I mistreat any one of you. Nye Sun helped Zhu Qingning to sit down. It's cold now. Remember not to wear so thin clothes. The room is very warm. You won't catch a cold, Zhu Qingning said. Now that the month is getting heavier, the clothes that were made a while ago are also tight. Zhu Qingning used her right hand to touch her slightly protruding belly. Her originally slim waist was slightly plump because of pregnancy. Although she lost her graceful figure, it added a bit of the unique charm of a mature woman. Ask someone to make a few more clothes. Not to mention 1 round, I can even put on 30 or 50 rounds. Before Nie Sun could finish his words, his ear was already pinched by a slim and soft hand. Zhu Qingning gritted her teeth beside his ear. 30 or 50 rounds? Not to mention 30 or 50 rounds, even if it's only 3 or 5 rounds, I'm afraid that you'll already have other beauties by your side. Nie Sun did not dare to struggle. He could only lean toward her according to her strength. His other hand held the mat to avoid really crushing her. Wunyang, who's gossiping in your ear? Do I look like that kind of person? Nie Sun tried his best to save his ear. Zhu Qingning pursed her lips and said with different intentions, I don't even have a place to walk. Who can gossip in my ear? But my body is getting heavier and sometimes it's inconvenient. I really need to arrange someone to serve you early. Nie Sun's parents were not around. Zhu Qingning did not have a mother-in-law to pressure her. Logically speaking, their married life should be very happy. As a matter of fact, they were indeed happy at the beginning, and their love for each other was joyous. As she got pregnant, her body became heavier and heavier and she liked to overthink. Nie Sun frowned and joked, Madam is not such a virtuous person. Your husband still remembers what you said before we got married? If other women took a fancy to your clothes, jewelry, and rouge, you would give them to them generously as long as you had a good relationship with them. But if someone takes a liking to your husband, don't even talk about moving. Even if you think about it for a moment, you have to teach that woman a lesson. Zhu Qingning's pretty face turned cold and she snorted unhappily. You think I'm willing? Isn't it all because of that lord of yours? Why did she send you so many women for no reason? Zhu Qingning was pregnant, so it was easy for her to overthink. Looking at the young women in the residence, he felt as if something was stuck in his heart, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. She also knew that her husband was a man of integrity and would not touch dirty women, but he could not withstand accidents. His wife was pregnant and couldn't serve him. What if he couldn't control himself and secretly ate her? Rather than letting her husband cheat outside and touch unknown women, it was better to pick a woman he knew through and through. No matter which possibility it was, Zhu Qingning was not happy, and her emotions were on the verge of exploding. She was the youngest daughter that her father doted on the most, the pearl in his hands. Why should she push her husband to another woman? She couldn't do it. Nie Sun frowned. Although he had a clever mind, he was a man after all, and his thoughts were not on the same channel as a woman's. How did he know that his wife had been troubled these days because of the maids in the residence? After all, it's the Lord's good intentions, so it's not good to refuse. Leave them in the residence to look at, and if they don't feel good, we can just sell them. Nie Sun had never looked at the maids in the residence seriously. To him, the maids were just maids that served the madam. If these maids made the madam unhappy, they would naturally be sold. Nie Sun said with a smile, Madam used to be so decisive, why are you so indecisive now? Zhu Qingning let out a long sigh and said dejectedly, I don't know either. These days I can't help but think too much and I can't control myself. Nie Sun suggested, why don't you write a letter for me and ask my mother-in-law to come over and accompany you for a while? If there was a mother-in-law to enlighten her, the madam would not think too much and scare herself. Zhu Qingning shook her head, that's not appropriate. Mother is already old and it's not good for her to travel. Nie Sun said, in that case why don't I spend more time at home? Zhu Qingning smiled and curved her eyebrows. The couple snuggled and said a lot of words of love, and the atmosphere around them was filled with a romantic atmosphere. By the way, Zhu Qingning suddenly thought of something. Nie Sun answered vaguely. This morning the housekeeper reported that he found a maid. This maid claimed to be my husband's wet nurse. Zhu Qingning knew that her husband had been looking for his background. He found it in Dongqing from Zhongzhou, but the clues were cut off. Even after joining Huang Song, Nie Sun did not give up on the journey to find his roots. My wet nurse. Over the years, Nie Sun had seen too many liars who wanted to pass off fake eyes as genuine, so he was very suspicious of the identity of this wet nurse. Zhu Qingning said, does Lang Jun want to see her? Nie Sun closed his eyes slightly, and the bright red cinnabar between his eyebrows became brighter. He said, then let's meet. The couple had dinner together. Nie Sun coaxed Zhu Qingning to sleep, and then left to see the so-called wet nurse. You said, you are my wet nurse? Nie Sun looked coldly at the old woman who was kneeling in the hall. The old woman had been waiting for a day in fear. When she heard Nie Sun's voice, which was clear and pleasant, she could not help but look up. When she saw it, she suddenly froze on the spot and her lips moved. Really like, the old woman murmured as if she was recalling something. Seeing her performance, Nie Sun suddenly became a little interested and asked with a smile, "Like what?" The old woman said with tears in her eyes, "Second Langjun and Madame Jeanne are too similar." "Madame Jeanne?" Nie Sun frowned, feeling that there might be a different harvest this time. "Who is the Madame Jeanne you are talking about?" The old woman said, "Madame Jeanne is Second Langjuan's biological mother." Nie Sun did not believe her. There were many people who looked alike in the world. Apart from that, there were many loopholes in some places. The old woman said that he was the child of Madame Jeanne, and claimed to be his wet nurse. From this, it could be seen that Madame Jeanne's husband's family should be well off. Since they were well off, how could a newborn boy be abducted and sold and end up in Zhongzhou? Nie Sun asked, "Do you have any evidence for what you said?" The old woman said, "I remember clearly that Second Langjun was born with cinnabar between his eyebrows. When he was born he was plump and beautiful." Nie Sun was speechless. Chapter 10:27. The old woman saw Nie Sun's unhappy expression and knew that she had said something wrong, so she quickly tried to remedy it. "I still remember one thing," she said hurriedly, "there was a red mole on the inside of your right thigh." After the old woman said this, Nie Sun's expression changed slightly. Other than his servants and his wife, no one else knew about his unique features, not to mention his inner thighs. Nie Sun had a feeling that maybe he could find the answer to the mystery that had puzzled him for many years from the old woman. The old woman cried, "Second Langjun, I really didn't lie to you. Every word is true." Nie Sun suppressed his emotions. "Other than that?" The old woman choked. She thought she had said something wrong, so she said in a trembling voice, "Other than that, you look like Madame Jeanne. When I saw you just now, I thought I saw the newly married Madame Jeanne. What a beautiful person. Unfortunately, a beautiful woman has a short life." Nie Sun didn't know what expression to show. He knew that he was very beautiful and he could outshine all the other beauties with just a little makeup, but he didn't like people talking about his appearance. His appearance was not as pure and unparalleled as Wei Xi's. Instead, he had an oppressive beauty. Because of his outstanding appearance, Nie Sun was often bullied as a girl by the Nie family when he was a child. Nie Sun still remembered the embarrassment and humiliation of being surrounded by people against the wall and being forced to take off his pants to prove that he was a man. "Are you serious?" The old woman said, "Of course. Madame Jeanne was very beautiful. It's hard to forget her." "You said that a beautiful woman has a short life. Did she die early?" Nie Sun didn't dare to ask for specific information. He always felt flustered, so he only dared to ask for some trivial information. The old woman shook her head like a rattled drum. She said, "Madame Jeanne is alive and well now." Nie Sun heard this and felt a little bad. His parents' family was not bad. Why did they abandon him? Nie Sun took a deep breath. "Tell me everything you know." The old woman nodded, but hesitated before she spoke. "Second Langjun, if I tell you, can you give me some money and food? My family's life is difficult." If it weren't for the fact that they were too poor, the old woman wouldn't have come to Nie Sun to try her luck. She wasn't sure if Nie Sun was the baby boy from back then. After all, she was the one who had buried the baby boy into the ground. Who knew that he was still alive? When she mentioned the red mole on her thigh, the man's expression changed drastically. It seemed like they were the same person. Nie Sun frowned deeply and waved his hand to signal his servant to bring a plate of silver to the old woman. There were 20 ingots. The old woman's hands trembled as she stroked the silver. She was so happy that she didn't hesitate to speak. "Second Langjun, what do you want to know? I will tell you everything I can." The old woman suppressed her excitement, and the wrinkles on her face squeezed together with a smile. Nie Sun asked, "Who are my parents? Why did they abandon me?" The old woman was stunned for a moment. She sighed and said, "Second Langjun, you were not abandoned." Nie Sun was startled. "Not abandoned?" The old woman nagged. "This old servant was Madame Jeanne's dowry maid, and later married a manservant. Madame Lai gave birth to eldest Langjun, but she couldn't win back the master's heart. Instead, she was suppressed by the master's favorite concubine. Later, Madame Jeanne and the concubine got pregnant at the same time. Even so, the master still didn't look at Madame Jeanne. Madame Lai risked a difficult labor and gave birth to you for a day and a night. That concubine also gave birth to a son. The master favored the concubine and neglected the wife. He couldn't bear that the concubine's son was treated as a concubine's son, so he simply swapped you too. Nyesun felt like he was listening to a heavenly book. He was so angry that he laughed. Which family has such a strange upbringing? Mixing the legal son and the concubine, and pretending to be the legal son? When Nyesun heard the truth, he began to doubt whether his ears were playing tricks on him. How could there be such a ridiculous thing? The old woman saw that Nyesun was angry and she hurriedly said, "This is absolutely true, but according to the rumor, it seems that Madame Lai was not content with her marriage, and secretly had an affair with a servant and gave birth to you. Outsiders said so, but this old servant dares to curse that Madame Lai is innocent and has never done anything wrong to the master. It must be the master's concubine who made it up and slandered Madame Zhen's innocence." Nyesun quickly calmed down and his expression didn't change. "I have a question." The old woman didn't know that danger was coming. Instead, she wore a flattering smile. "Second Langjun, please ask." Nyesun said, "You should be the concubine's servant, right?" The old woman was so scared that her face turned ashen and her legs were trembling. This, Nyesun said indifferently, "Mixing the legal son and the concubine's son is such a big thing. There should be very few people who know about it. Not only do you know about it, but you even claim to be my wet nurse. It can be seen that you must have taken care of me in the past, so you know that I have a red mole on my leg. In that case, I have another question. How did I leave the mansion and end up being sold?" The old woman opened her eyes wide in astonishment. She was so scared that she retreated on her knees. She didn't even dare to look at the plate of silver. Second Langjun, Nyesun got up from the table, raised his hand and pulled out the sword at his waist. The tip of the sword was against the old woman's throat. "Tell me the truth." The old woman cried and said, "Every word I said is true. The concubine saw that you looked too much like Lady Chang. She was afraid that you would arouse Lady Chang's suspicion during the elders' meeting, so she asked me to send you out of the mansion. She even ordered me to bury you." Hearing the word bury, Nyesun was basically sure that the old woman was telling the truth. Nyesun followed the clues to Dongqing and asked many people. The first person who found Nyesun was a farmer's wife. She accidentally heard crying in the ground, so she dug out the dying Nyesun from the soil. The farmer's wife didn't take care of him. Instead, she sold him to a human trafficker. Because Nyesun was good-looking, he was more expensive than a normal baby boy. After a few twists and turns, Nyesun ended up in Zhongzhou. Coincidentally, he was adopted by a side branch of the Nye family. Nyesun asked the old woman in a low voice, "Tell me, who are my birth parents?" Although Nyesun came to find his birth parents, he didn't have much feelings for them. He just wanted to find his roots. If his birth parents lost him because they had no other choice, Nyesun could consider helping them. If his birth parents abandoned him on purpose, he would make them regret it. Nyesun didn't want to acknowledge anything, not to mention giving birth. In his opinion, the essence of giving birth was just one sentence. When a man and a woman get together, they have children. The mother was pregnant for 10 months and the father was just a knight of pleasure. They had the right to give birth to him, but they didn't have the right to take his life. The old woman looked at Nyesun's gloomy face, and her heart couldn't help but tremble. She said with a trembling voice, "Second Longjuan's birth father is the leader of the Meng family in Sangzhou. His surname is Meng and his name is Zhan. His birth mother is the daughter of a concubine from the Gu family in Langya. Her name is Gu Zhen. She has now remarried to Lu Shi, the second legitimate son of the Lu family in Hejian. I heard that Lu Shi is quite famous now. Second Langjun. I'm telling the truth." Nyesun was speechless. "Say it again." "I didn't hear it clearly." The old woman closed her eyes and looked like she was facing death calmly. She repeated it intermittently. Nyesun was so shocked that he took a few steps back. The sword in his hand fell to the ground. Chapter 1028. The night was dark. Raindrops the size of beans hit the window, making a pitter-patter. The candlelight was slightly intoxicating, and the shadows were reflected on the paper window, swaying. The shadows of the trees were like strange arms, shaking with the storm. The sound of thunder outside woke Zhu Qingning up from his sleep. She suddenly sat up, and the quilt covering her rolled up to her lower abdomen. The surrounding cold air rushed to Zhu Qingning. "Langjun?" She raised her hand to touch the side of her body, and found that the other side of the bed was cold. "Langjun hasn't come back to bed yet?" Zhu Qingning was a little worried. She picked up the fur coat hanging at the head of the bed and put it on. She picked up a lamp and went to find Nyesun. Seeing that the candle in the study was still lit, Zhu Qingning walked over slowly. She opened the paper door and a strong smell of alcohol hit her face. Lang Jun? Zhu Qingning had known Ye Sun for a long time, but she had never seen him drunk. Even if it was the Lord's banquet, he would control his alcohol tolerance. But now, looking at the scattered wine jars beside Ye Sun, Zhu Qingning's heart tightened and she hurried forward. Wunyang. Ye Sun was a good drinker. Not to mention that he was only half drunk. Even if he was completely drunk, he wouldn't go crazy. He would just sit there obediently. Lang Jun, what happened? Zhu Qingning took out a handkerchief and wiped the wine stains on Ye Sun's mouth. She felt distressed and thought about all the things that had happened recently. It seemed that only the wet nurse could make Ye Sun lose his composure. She said, Lang Jun, if you can't find your family, then you can't find them. You still have me and the child in your belly in the future. Why do you want to ruin your health for a pair of parents you have never met? Ye Sun opened his drunken eyes, and it took him a long time to regain his senses. He raised his hand and rubbed his swollen temples. He held Zhu Qingning in his arms like he was holding a child. His chin was on her neck and he said vaguely, Wunyang? I finally found. Zhu Qingning was surprised. Found? Isn't this a good thing? Why did you drink so much? Ye Sun's arms rubbed her shoulders and his hands were on her belly. He had a bitter smile on his face. This is not a good thing. Wunyang, do you know who my biological parents are? Zhu Qingning asked. Who is it? Ye Sun whispered in her ear. Zhu Qingning was not a foolish woman and immediately grasped the center of gravity. It's actually, apart from you and me, does anyone else know about this? Zhu Qingning sucked in a breath of cold air. If her husband had such a background, he would be in an awkward situation now. This matter is of great importance. How can it be spread out so easily? Ye Sun shook his head. He said, this matter must be kept a secret. Meng Zhan didn't raise me, but he gave birth to me. In the eyes of the world, a son was still a son and a father was still a father. No matter how wrong the father was, the son could not disobey. However, Meng Zhan was a stumbling block in his master's way. He had to be removed. If this husband's identity were to be spread out, I'm afraid that some people with ulterior motives would make a fuss about it. I'm not worried, but I'm afraid I'll implicate you and the child. Ye Sun didn't want to acknowledge Meng Zhan's kindness, but he couldn't stand the gossip of others. Zhu Qingning was heartbroken by Ye Sun's words. He didn't care if Meng Zhan lived or died. She thought that her husband's life was rough enough, but she didn't expect him to experience so many unknown hardships. However, Zhu Qingning said in a low voice, Lang Jun, why don't you avoid the Mengs? There is no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. The mystery of Lang Jun's identity is a hidden danger. If someone with ulterior motives uses it, how will you live in the future? It's better to be a bystander and watch. Ye Sun felt bitter in his mouth. Didn't he want that too? But the world was full of tricks. Some things couldn't be avoided even if one wanted to. Meng Zhan was my benefactor, but he mixed up the official and the concubine to harm me. This debt of gratitude is offset. Ye Sun reeked of alcohol, but his eyes were calm. In his position he has to make his own plans. Since I'm loyal to the Lord, of course I have to make plans for him. For Ye Sun, Meng Zhan was just an enemy he was going to plot against. Zhu Qingning's throat was stuck. She wanted to persuade him, but she swallowed her words in the end. Lang Jun, be careful. Ye Sun sighed and patted his wife's back. He said gently, I know. The couple hugged for a long time. Zhu Qingning suddenly thought of someone. If what the wet nurse said is true, there shouldn't be many people who know about Lang Jun's background. As long as they don't say anything, how will others know? Zhu Qingning's eyes turned cold. She gripped her sleeves and said harshly, that wet nurse. Lang Jun, have you thought about how to deal with her? Ye Sun's lips curled into a smile. He said, I've dealt with her thoroughly. Dead people wouldn't reveal the truth. Even without Zhu Qingning's reminder, Ye Sun wouldn't let the old woman have a chance to live. In addition, Ye Sun also sent the old woman's family away that very night. He gave them a large sum of money for settling down. Zhu Qingning's nerves relaxed. The smell of alcohol made her feel uncomfortable. Lang Jun, you've already made up your mind. Why are you still worried? Ye Sun sighed. He said, Wunyang, you don't know. I'm not worried about my background. I'm worried about the Lord. The Lord? Is the Lord making things difficult for you? No. Why is he making things difficult for me? Ye Sun laughed. The Lord is good in every aspect, but he's a little suspicious. If my background is exposed, it's not a big deal. I'm just afraid that the Lord will be suspicious. After all, Meng Zhan's first wife is now Lu Shi's second wife. Lu Shi's stepmother and aunt. With this relationship, even if I tell others that I don't recognize it, they might not think so. People always thought that blood ties could not be broken. Even if the bones were broken, the tendons were still connected. From this, it could be concluded that Nie Sun was Gu Jin's son. He would definitely side with the Lu family. It was obviously a robber's theory, but countless stupid people regarded it as a standard. Zhu Qingning exclaimed softly. After a while she said, Lang Jun is loyal to the Lord. He's not the kind of person who changes his mind. I can't stop the Lord from thinking too much. Zhu Qingning was unconvinced. How can it be like this? Isn't Feng Bijie's second brother also working under Lu Shi? Feng Ju was Huang Song's most trusted official in Haozhou. Nie Sun said, Huijie and the Lord have been close friends since they were young. Their relationship is extraordinary. How can it be the same? Zhu Qingning's face turned pale. She muttered, Lang Jun has already dealt with the wet nurse. No one should know about this. Nie Sun smiled bitterly. It's hard to say. Zhu Qingning looked at her husband in confusion. Nie Sun coughed softly and said in a low voice, I'm afraid that I've offended Lu Shi badly. Outsiders say that he's open-minded and carefree. But from my point of view, no matter how petty he is, he's still vengeful. How did you offend him? Nie Sun said, I came up with a plan for the Lord. Zhu Qingning blinked and asked, and then? Nie Sun coughed softly again. Chapter 1029. Zhu Qingning immediately figured out the crux of the matter. It was a blatant plot. Knowing that there was a trap in front of him, Lu Shi had to jump into it. Nie Sun said, Lu Shi conquered the entire northern borderline. I thought it would take 2 to 3 years, but I didn't expect him to defeat the northern borderline in just 11 months. I heard a lot of news from the Lord. I have to admit that Lu Shi is definitely a big threat to the Lord. She can only feel at ease if she gets rid of him as soon as possible. If we don't do anything and let her stabilize the northern borderline and train a large number of cavalrymen, I'm afraid she can sweep Dongqing. Zhu Qingning was speechless. Hearing the name Lu Shi, the image of a youth in cotton clothes and wooden clogs hiding among the branches full of flowers appeared in his mind. He looked lazy and unrestrained. Even today that scene was still as vivid as before. Nie Sun didn't know what Zhu Qingning was thinking. He sighed and said, I don't want to plot against Lu Shi. Lu Shi's power is in a delicate position. Even if the Lord doesn't provoke her, she won't let you go. Although she's a woman, her ambition isn't as simple as just one state and one county. If she wants to continue expanding her power, she can't avoid the Lord. Sooner or later the two of them will fight. Jiang Pingji had already conquered the entire northern borderline. In addition to the 2 states and 1 county in Dongqing, her territory was comparable to a country. The Lord Huang Song only had Haozhou. No matter what, he was no match for Jiang Pingji. Therefore, Nie Sun had to plan for Huang Song and close the gap between them as much as possible. A glimmer of calculation flashed in his eyes. Nie Sun's original intention was to annex Qinzhou and control half of Cangzhou. The other half of Cangzhou would be given to Jiang Pingji. If they could stabilize 2 states and half of Cangzhou, Huang Song and Lu Shi would have the capital to compete. However, Nie Sun looked down at his wife, whose breathing was gradually stabilizing. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He didn't acknowledge Meng Zhan's kindness, but Meng Zhan owed him. He had to get it back no matter what. Why not use the whole of Cangzhou as compensation? Nie Sun carried Zhu Qingning and carried him back to the bedroom. Outside there was a thunderstorm, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Compared to Nie Sun's blissful life with his wife, his brother Meng Heng was not so lucky. Meng Heng was wearing a gray scholar's robe. His sleeves and back were mottled with whip marks. Blood was flowing from his open flesh. The thunderstorm washed the blood from his wounds to the ground. Even in such a mess, he still tried to crawl to Meng Zhan, who was standing in the corridor. Father, I beg you, don't make the same mistake again. Meng Zhan held a long whip in his hand. There were some barbs on the whip and there were some blood beads on the barbs. This whip was used to punish the unfilial disciples of the Meng clan. According to the clan rules, only clansmen who had committed grave mistakes would be whipped with this whip. Get lost. Since when did I have such an unfilial son? Meng Zhan responded with a cold smile. Years had passed and he looked older. His eyes were filled with a cold light. Meng Heng knelt in the torrential rain. His jade crown was nowhere to be seen, and his long wet hair stuck to his cheeks and back. Even if your younger brother Meng passes away, it's not your turn to inherit the Meng family. I'm not dead yet. Meng Zhan was furious. Meng Heng had been studying abroad for years and he was always against him. From the Battle of Huangshui to the cooperation with the northern borderline, it was no wonder that his son was left behind by Guzhen. Every time he saw him, Meng Zhan felt disgusted, as if there was phlegm stuck in his throat. The corner of Meng Heng's lip was broken, and the cold rainwater drenched his wound. The pain made him tremble, but he still stubbornly said, "Ancestor Duke Meng slaughtered many Changwu people. As a descendant of Duke Meng, how can I go against the will of our ancestors and help outsiders? Now that Lu Shi has conquered the northern borderline, he will settle the score in a few days. Father, please stop. Don't let the people of Cangzhou suffer." Because of Meng Zhan, the people of Cangzhou had suffered for the past 10 years. However, as the Zongzi of the Meng clan, Meng Heng couldn't do anything. He couldn't protect the people of Cangzhou. If Meng Zhan still wanted to go against Lu Shi and Huang Song with all the power of Cangzhou, the people would suffer. Hearing Meng Heng's words, Meng Zhan was so angry that he laughed. He swung the long whip in his hand at Meng Heng's face. When the shadow of the whip passed, there was a horrifying cut on Meng Heng's face. His left eyelid was scratched and blood flowed down half of his face. Someone take this unfilial son away. Let him kneel in front of the ancestral hall and reflect on his actions. If it weren't for the elder's advice, Meng Zhan would have killed Meng Heng. Meng Zhan was so angry that he smashed everything in the study. The flickering candlelight shone on his face. Meng Zhan's mouth curved into a hideous smile, like a Rakshasa ghost. Lu Shi, the father and daughter had made him suffer too much. How could he swallow his anger? He was whipped by his father, drenched in the rain, and knelt in front of the ancestral hall for a whole night in wet clothes. Even if his body was made of iron, he couldn't take it. As expected, Meng Heng had a high fever that night. His body was burning and his consciousness was hazy. He was walking on the edge of life and death. 3 days later, he slowly woke up. When he opened his eyes, he found that his left eye was covered by something. It was so thick that it made his eyes uncomfortable. Lang Jun? Lang Jun is awake. Meng Heng's wife had been watching over him for 3 days and 3 nights. Seeing him wake up, she was so happy that she almost cried. Meng Heng's throat was dry. He only managed to say one word before he felt like a knife was cutting his throat. Water? His wife brought him water and helped him swallow. My eye? Meng Heng weakly raised his hand and touched his left eye. He only felt a thick white cloth. Your eye is fine. Luckily, only your eyelid was hurt. The doctor said that if the knife had cut deeper, your eyeball would have been ruined. Meng Heng's wife sighed and quickly cleaned up the dishes. Meng Heng sat on the couch, his right eye lifeless. After a while, his wife brought him a bowl of porridge. Meng Heng glanced at her wrist. The golden bracelet with 2 phoenixes holding beads was gone. Where's your bracelet? His wife's anger subsided when she saw that he was still so careful even though he had just recovered from a serious illness. I pawned it. Pawned it? If I didn't, where would I get the money to buy medicine and hire a doctor? His wife sighed and fed him the porridge. Ever since you were disfigured and almost went blind, the Meng clan didn't even send a single person. They just threw you home to fend for yourself. Meng Heng's hands trembled. His right eye shone and was filled with water vapor. After a while, he said, It's been hard for you to be with me. His wife said, We're one family. Don't say that. Drink it. Don't ask for a beating in front of your father anymore. Meng Heng lowered his head and drank the porridge. His eyes swept over his wife's bulging belly. His wife had been pregnant for 5 months. The children in her belly needed nourishment, but he was disappointing and let them suffer. His wife took a deep breath and resisted the urge to cry. She lowered her head and heard Meng Heng's calm voice. Jiaodi, how much money do we have left? His wife whispered, Only 30 taels left. 30 taels? Meng Heng mumbled, That's barely enough. What are you doing? Chapter 1030. His wife put down the bowl helplessly and murmured blankly. Leave? Meng Heng heaved a long sigh and wrapped his wife's hands in his big palms. His hands were warm and dry, which made his wife feel more at ease. Cangzhou is not a place to stay for long. I tried to persuade my father to admit defeat so that the people of Cangzhou would be spared from the war. But Meng Heng's mouth was slightly bitter. My father no longer cares about the people. Cangzhou will inevitably be affected by the war. Cangzhou might not be afraid of Huang Song alone. But with cousin Shi, Cangzhou has no chance of winning. His wife pressed her lips tightly, her eyes filled with a sense of loss about the future. Cousin Shi? I often hear you mention her. Since you are relatives, why can't you talk about it calmly? Meng Heng smiled bitterly. He stroked his wife's hair with one hand and sighed faintly. It's not that simple, Zhaodi. Even if we are blood-related, this relationship is fragile in front of the world, let alone a cousin. Meng Heng said, my father's stubbornness will inevitably bring disaster to the people of Cangzhou. If the Meng family in Cangzhou still had the legacy of their ancestors, why would Meng Heng persuade his father to admit defeat? The Meng family had lost the people's support and would not last long. His wife turned around and took out her dowry. The bottom layer of the dowry hid the family's savings. But there are only 30 taels of silver. It's chaotic outside. Where can we go? Meng Heng looked at the silver pieces and then at his wife's careful posture. His chest could not help but twitch and ache. He suppressed his emotions and said in a low voice, I'll spend 15 taels to nourish your body and protect your pregnancy. The remaining 15 taels to buy a carriage, dry food, and a water bag. Let's go to Hanchang Pass. Out of Hanchang Pass, we'll go straight to Heda County at the border of Haozhou and Cangzhou. We'll stay there for the time being. His wife's eyes widened and her hands holding the dowry trembled. Langjun, isn't there a war there? It's because there is a war there that we have to go there. We don't have much savings. We won't be able to make it to Hejin County, let alone Wanzhou and Chongzhou, Meng Heng said. Huang Song and cousin Shi formed an alliance and helped her delay the Meng's troops. Now that the war in Beijiang had ended, Huang Song might not be able to sit still. He would definitely write to cousin Shi for help. We don't have to go far. We just need to wait in Heda County. His wife was at a loss, but she was used to being docile and obedient. She would do whatever Meng Heng said. Looking at his wife's slightly protruding belly, Meng Heng had a look of realization. If it wasn't for the fact that Cangzhou had no one to entrust him to, he wouldn't have brought his wife through the war zone. The risk was simply too great. Although Meng Heng was Meng Zhan's only son, his position in the Mengs was very awkward. He was even less favored than the son of a concubine. In the early years, the elders of the Meng family had taken good care of him. As time went by, Meng Zhan's pressure on him became heavier and heavier. Seeing that, the elders of the Mengs were planning to change to another branch. In theory, Meng Heng's wife should be the matriarch of the Mengs. However, Meng Zhan was too lazy to arrange a marriage for him, so Meng Heng didn't get married until he was 23. It was because the elders of the Mengs couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to arrange it for him. He did get married, but his wife's background was very subtle. She was the daughter of a branch of a declining aristocratic family. It was a nice way to put it. To put it bluntly, his wife was just the daughter of a butcher. The aristocratic families were also divided into different classes. The prominent aristocratic families could control the situation. The declining aristocratic families were even worse than the common people. Except for a famous ancestor, they had almost nothing. Meng Heng's wife was from a branch of a declining aristocratic family. To make a living, her grandfather gave up his pride and became a butcher. If it weren't for the genealogy, his wife's family would be no different from the common people. Meng Heng didn't look down on his wife's background, but he couldn't deny that this marriage was indeed a humiliation to him by the Mengs. Meng Heng had endured all of this. Now that he looked back, he felt extremely guilty. No matter what happened in the past, Zhao Di was already his wife. He had the responsibility and obligation to make her live a good life. But what happened? Fortunately, it wasn't too late to wake up. Meng Zhan wasn't a good father, but he couldn't be an irresponsible husband and father. The couple lived in a remote place. There wasn't much in the house, so it wasn't hard to put them away. Meng Heng drove his wife out of Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Meng Zhan didn't know the news until they reached the border of Meng County. The subordinate waited in fear, afraid of Meng Zhan's thunderous anger. You said, he left Meng County with that lowly woman and went to Hanchang Pass? Meng Zhan asked with a cold smile. The subordinate was so anxious that he was sweating. He said anxiously, yes. Do you need me to send someone to get Elder Langjun back? Meng Zhan looked at the subordinate coldly. His eyes were full of warning. Since when do you have the right to make decisions for me? Meng Zhan snorted and said heartlessly, since he doesn't recognize me as his father, I will pretend that I never had a son. Send someone to tell the elders to open the ancestral hall and remove his name. The subordinate opened his eyes wide in shock. No matter what, Meng Heng was still a Zongzi. Since ancient times, there was no reason to remove the name of a Zongzi from the genealogy. Meng Zhan knew what he was thinking and said with a cold smile, Zongzi? Look at his wife, a butcher who can't even be seen in public. How can a woman like her be the matriarch of the Mengs? Since he has abandoned the Mengs, then let it be. Alright, send someone to chase after him. Also, bring a message for me. If he leaves, the Mengs don't come back. He is not a Zongzi of the Mengs, and he has no right to use the surname Meng. Even his surname has been removed. The subordinate said, yes. For safety reasons, Meng Heng tried to take the main road. To take care of his wife, the carriage traveled slowly. It was only 3 days away from Hanchang Pass. The pursuers from the Mengs caught up with Meng Heng and brought a message from Meng Zhan. Meng Heng listened to the message with a pale face. His lips were colorless. His left eyelid, which should have healed, was hurting. The scene in front of him flickered and he almost lost his balance. Elder Lang Jun, why don't you go back and apologize to the patriarch? There is no hatred between father and son. The subordinate looked at Meng Heng's pale face and felt sorry for him. Meng Heng's talent was second to none among his peers. If any family had such a good descendant, they would have been so happy. But his patriarch was a weirdo. Meng Zhan didn't feel proud or honored. Instead, he felt ashamed of Meng Heng. He scolded him every few days and tried to suppress him. They were not father and son. They were enemies. There is no hatred between father and son. But what if they are not father and son? Meng Heng smiled bitterly and held back the hot tears that were welling up in his eyes. He said gloomily, allow me to kowtow to him again. If there's a chance, I'll definitely repay him for raising me for over 20 years. Meng Heng knelt down in the direction of Meng County in Sangzhou and kowtowed 3 times. His forehead was blue and red. The subordinate looked at Meng Heng, who staggered to get up and sighed. Elder Lang Jun, the war is still going on. For safety's sake, you should change your route. Chapter 1031. Cough cough cough, who are you talking about? Who's here? Huang Song was enjoying his tea. When he heard his subordinate's message, he almost choked on the tea. The subordinate could only bite the bullet and repeat it. Early this morning, Yuan Chong, the lieutenant under Huang Song's command, was patrolling. They found a couple whose whereabouts were suspicious, so they simply arrested them for questioning. Among them, the man had a scholarly temperament. Although he was wearing shabby linen clothes, he was neither servile nor overbearing when he asked questions. Obviously, he was not an ordinary person. Once she asked, she was shocked. The couple was from Meng County, Song Prefecture. Yuan Chong thought he was a spy, but upon further investigation he realized that the man was actually the eldest son of the Meng family, Meng Heng. However, Meng Heng smiled bitterly at Yuan Chong's suspicious gaze. That was in the past. Now, I'm just a commoner without a surname. Meng Heng was expelled from the Meng family, and his family name was removed. Hearing this, Yuan Chong pulled out his knife and placed it on Meng Heng's neck. He said mockingly, Old Meng's son, aren't you afraid of death? However, Meng Heng said, my mother is the stepmother of Lu Shi, the governor of Lu province. Lu Shi and I are cousins. Do you really dare to behead me? This relationship was Meng Heng's final trump card. He was also certain that Yuan Chong would not dare to kill him. Although Huang Song and Jiang Pingji each had their own plans, they had not completely fallen out with each other yet. Huang Song did not dare to kill Jiang Pingji's cousin, even if his identity had not been verified. After coughing enough, Huang Song wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. Invite him over. After the subordinate left, Cheng Jing, who was handling official business, put down the things in his hands and asked, that person was Meng Heng? Huang Song asked, Yumo knows him? Cheng Jing said calmly, Meng Heng and Jing were assessed in the same year. Originally he was the best contender for the top 3, but Meng Heng was influenced by his younger brother, Meng Liang. In the end, the examiner gave him a very low evaluation, which resulted in Meng Heng not even making it into the top 100. When Feng Ju heard the commotion, he also came over to intervene. Meng Heng is my brother's classmate. They have a good relationship, Feng Ju said with a smile. If the person is really Meng Heng, Ju will recognize him. In fact, both Feng Ju and Cheng Jing felt that the person who came was really Meng Heng. This was a sensitive time. Who would dare to pretend to be a disciple of the Meng family in Huang Song's territory? Was he not afraid of death? The 3 of them didn't notice that when Ye Sun heard the news, his hand froze and he almost dropped his brush. Fortunately, no one was paying attention to him. Ye Sun quickly adjusted his mentality and pretended that nothing had happened. Meng Heng was led by a servant to Huang Song. Huang Song had grown a beard and looked even more dignified and calm. Greetings, Haozhou Prefecture Overseer. Meng Heng used the etiquette common people used to greet officials, but Huang Song was frightened and quickly stood up to stop him. Huang Song laughed. Lanting and I are like siblings. You are Lanting's cousin, so you are also my cousin. There is no need to be so formal. Ching Jing and the others sat behind the screen and watched. When Meng Heng entered their line of sight, they confirmed his identity. Although they had not seen each other for many years, Meng Heng's appearance had not changed much. He had only become more mature and easily recognizable. Meng Heng smiled bitterly. Even so, etiquette cannot be ignored. Huang Song asked Meng Heng to sit on the lower right side and said hesitantly, "I have something to ask, but I don't know if I should ask." Meng Heng knew what he wanted to ask. He was doubting his intentions. "Heng has been expelled from the ancestral hall by my father. Now that I have no home to return to, I want to seek refuge with cousin Shi." At this point there was nothing to be ashamed of. Meng Heng simply said everything. "However, I am short of money and my wife's health is heavy. It is chaotic outside, so the couple can't go too far. I heard that cousin Shi is about to lead troops to Hutta County, so Heng brought my wife here to wait." "Sister-in-law is pregnant?" Huang Song asked Yuan Chong with a stern face. "You brat, did you offend her?" Yuan Chong was worried about Huang Song's safety, so he personally brought Meng Heng to see Huang Song. Meng Heng revealed a faint smile. "Commandant Yuan is just enforcing the law. My wife is fine." Huang Song could not let it go so easily. He sent people to arrange a residence for Meng Heng and his wife. He also found an experienced midwife and a skilled doctor. Huang Song saw Meng Heng's embarrassment and took the initiative to say, "Just stay here. If there is anything you need, send someone to tell me." He had good intentions, so Meng Heng would not be ungrateful. However, Meng Heng was clear that Huang Song was treating him so well because of Jiang Pingji. He was taking good care of him. "Langjun, are we staying here?" Meng Heng's wife held her belly with one hand and touched the pillar with the other. She looked up at the sky. The sky was clear and the golden sunlight shone on her body. It was very comfortable. "We'll rest here for the time being." Meng Heng looked at the silk and satins, clothes and jewelry in the house, then looked at his wife's bare face. He helped her into the house. "Your clothes are old. Pick a few bolts of cloth to make some new clothes. Don't treat yourself badly." His wife touched the material. The soft touch made her reluctant to move her hand away. She had never used such good material in her life. "They are all gifts from others. It's not good to use them. In this way, won't you owe everyone a favor?" His wife resisted and forced herself to move her eyes away. "I owe cousin Shi. I'll repay you in the future." Meng Heng smiled as he picked up a golden bracelet made of twin phoenix silk and put it on his wife's wrist. The golden color was far better than the one that had been pawned, and it was heavier. Because of the bracelet, his wife's wrist seemed even more slender and weak. "In the future your husband will earn more for you. I will never let you and our child suffer any losses." If it were not for Jiang Pingji, Huang Song would not have treated him so well. Therefore Meng Heng was very clear about whom he owed a favor. His wife smiled. "I believe you." It was a great honor for the butcher's daughter to marry the eldest son of the Mengs, but it was a great humiliation for Meng Heng. Meng Heng felt that he had treated her unfairly, but she felt that she had wronged him. No matter what, they were husband and wife. They would support each other for the rest of their lives. At that moment, the maidservant reported from outside the paper door. Meng Heng and his wife were stunned. "This Nyesun. Does my husband know you?" His wife was surprised. They had just settled down here and someone had brought his wife to visit. Meng Heng was also puzzled, but he had also asked around. Nyesun was a strategist that Huang Song relied heavily on. He could not be offended easily. "I don't know him. He's Nyesun's wife. Madam, please entertain him." Then he said to the maidservant, "Please wait in the hall, Mr. Nye. I'll go over now." Did Nyesun visit on Huang Song's orders? With such doubts, Meng Heng met Nyesun for the first time. The two looked at each other. They both felt a strange emotion rise from the bottom of their hearts. Nyesun did not observe Meng Heng carefully through the screen. Now that they were face to face, he realized that Meng Heng did not have any similarities with him. Chapter 1032. While Nyesun was observing Meng Heng, wasn't Meng Heng also sizing him up? When he saw Nyesun walking against the light, he vaguely saw the graceful and gorgeous beauty walking towards him, her face incomparably magnificent. Meng Heng took a closer look and finally saw Nyesun's true appearance. He couldn't help but sigh in admiration. There was actually such a stunning face in this world. After the surprise, Meng Heng vaguely felt that Nyesun's face was somewhat familiar, but the memory was too distant, and he couldn't recall it immediately. Nyesun laughed and teased when he saw this. Sun's face is extremely similar to a Rakshasa, actually scaring Brother Heng to the point of not knowing what to say? When Nyesun said that, Meng Heng quickly retracted his thoughts and stopped thinking about where he had seen Nyesun. How can that be? Meng Heng said, "If Brother Sun's face was like a Rakshasa, wouldn't Heng be too ashamed to meet people?" Although Meng Heng had never met Nye Sun before, he felt an urge to get close to him. It was as if the two of them had known each other for a long time. When Nye Sun called him Brother Heng, Meng Heng very naturally followed up and called him Little Brother Sun. As soon as the two of them met, they addressed each other as brothers. With just a few words they had become extremely close to each other. As Meng Heng joked with Nye Sun, he was secretly impressed by the other party's thoroughness. Why did he say that Nye Sun was thorough? Meng Heng was expelled from the Meng family. He only had his first name and no surname, so it was very awkward to address him. Nye Sun called him Brother Heng, cleverly avoiding this point and preserving Meng Heng's remaining face. Was this not considered thorough? Meng Heng was grateful for her thoughtfulness. His expression softened, and his attitude became friendlier and friendlier. Brother Sun's appearance is the most beautiful I've ever seen in my life. I'm afraid there are very few people in the world who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Brother Sun, you shouldn't belittle yourself. Meng Heng honestly explained the reason for his absent-mindedness. I was dazed just now. Younger Brother Sun, please forgive this older brother's rude and impetuous actions. Nye Sun had known that he was good-looking since he was young. What kind of compliment had he not heard before? He was tired of listening to it. When these words came out of Meng Heng's mouth, Nye Sun felt comfortable all over. The corners of his lips curled up a little. Meng Heng added, "I'm not afraid of Brother Sun laughing at me. When I saw you walking over just now, I felt as though I saw an old friend that I hadn't seen for many years." Nye Sun was shocked, but he said, "Really? So it's not just Sun who has this feeling." Although they felt like old friends at first sight, Meng Heng did not let down his guard. Instead, he secretly probed Nye Sun's intentions. In his opinion, Nye Sun's visit was definitely instructed by Huang Song, but he didn't know what the purpose was. After talking for more than an hour, the sky outside gradually darkened. Nye Sun took his leave regretfully, and Meng Heng stood up to send him off. After sending him off, Meng Heng still had no idea why Nye Sun was there. Don't look at how they talked, but if you really analyzed the content of the conversation, you would find that they only talked about the interesting things of their youth and didn't touch on any political affairs. You really don't know Mr. Nye? Meng Heng returned to his room in a daze. His wife's puzzled question drifted into his ears. I just feel that he looks familiar, but after thinking about it, I really haven't seen him before. Meng Heng came back to his senses and said, I heard that Nye Sun is from Bianzhou in Zhongzhou. Before he became an official in Huangsong, he never left his homeland. How did I get to know him? Why do you ask? Meng Heng's wife pointed at the pile of gifts on the table and sighed. This Madame Nye is truly a considerate and gentle person. Look at the gifts she gave. Every single one of them is delivered to the heart. Governor Huang's gift of silk satin and gold and silver jewelry is good, but this madam gave a lot of good fertility medicine and nourishing food. These materials are delicate and soft. Although they haven't been dyed, they're best for women and babies. Huang Song's gifts were expensive, but many of the materials weren't suitable for pregnant women. They looked good but weren't practical. Nye Sun and his wife's gifts were heartfelt. It was as if everything had been considered. Not only were there gentle and nourishing herbs, food and cloth, but there was also a box of silver fragments. Huang Song gave him gold, which he couldn't spend. However, the box of silver fragments Nye Sun and his wife gave him immediately came in handy. The gifts weren't very expensive, but the thought was enough. Meng Heng frowned and raised his hand to touch the items. After thinking about it, Meng Heng's brows relaxed. Just now, Nye Sun mentioned that his wife is also pregnant. Because Madame Nye was also pregnant, it was more convenient to prepare the things a pregnant woman needed. No matter how he thought about it, this was the only reason that made sense. Meng Heng glanced at his wife. When he saw that she was smiling and didn't look like she was wronged, his impression of Nye Sun and his wife improved. He heard that Nye Sun's wife was the youngest legitimate daughter of Master Yuanjing. She had an extraordinary background and a good upbringing. This kind of noble lady was prideful to the core and disdained to associate with lowly people. Because his wife was the daughter of a butcher, no one taught her how to deal with those difficult women when she was still a virgin. After his wife married him, she was often ostracized by the other noble ladies of the Meng family, both openly and secretly. Meng Heng knew this, but he couldn't help her. Every time he saw his wife's sad expression, Meng Heng felt bad. He could only try his best to help her. Nye Sun and his wife came to visit. They couldn't just take care of Nye Sun and leave Nye Sun's wife to the side, right? In the end, the mistress still had to entertain them. From the looks of it, Nie Sun's wife didn't have the bad temper of a noble lady and was very gentle. His wife said, "No wonder, Madame Nie looks childish but she's very good at raising children." Meng Heng asked casually, "What's Madame Nie's personality like?" His wife said, "I was a little worried that I would neglect her, but after getting to know her, that Madame's personality is really great." She had interacted with many noble ladies, but they couldn't compare to Madame Nie. Not to mention anything else, just her temperament made people unable to help but get close to her. However, there was one thing that was very strange. Madame Nie was very respectful to her. But then again she was only the daughter of a butcher. What did she have that was worthy of a madam from a noble family treating her with respect? That was why his wife asked Meng Heng if he was close friends with Nie Sun. The husband and wife looked at each other, puzzled. It was late at night. Meng Heng and his wife were tired, so they washed up and went to bed. Meng Heng closed his eyes but he couldn't fall asleep. Nie Sun's face kept swaying in front of him. Meng Heng tossed and turned, startling his wife who was beside him. "Lang Jun?" His wife was confused. Meng Heng's mind flashed and he suddenly remembered another face. "I remember, mother?" Meng Heng blurted out. His wife was surprised. "Mother? What does this have to do with mother-in-law?" "Nie Sun, he looks a little similar to mother when she was young." "I was wondering why I thought he looked familiar," his wife exclaimed. "Mr. Nie looks like mother-in-law when she was young?" Meng Heng said, "I was just thinking about who Nie Sun looks like and I suddenly remembered when I was young. Nie Sun does look a little similar to mother." The Meng and Madame Lu were enemies, so Meng Heng was also restrained. Even though he got married, he couldn't bring his wife to meet his birth mother. Chapter 1033. No wonder, when I see Nie Sun I always feel close. With his doubts cleared, Meng Heng felt much better. Only then did the late drowsiness come over him. Gu Zhen did not tell Meng Heng that the second son of the first wife had been swapped, so when Meng Heng found that Nie Sun looked like Gu Zhen and saw the bright red cinnabar mole between his eyebrows, he did not think much of it. Instead he sighed at how wonderful fate was. He felt that Nie Sun was amiable and it was not an illusion. Meng Heng and his wife whispered a few words to each other and fell asleep peacefully. Nie Sun and his wife on the other hand could not fall asleep. Zhu Qingning was the daughter of Master Yuanjing. Naturally she was not an ordinary woman. She chatted with Meng Heng's wife for quite a while. It looked like they were just chatting about family matters, but in reality she had managed to dig out the other party's background. First uncle is a Zongzi of the Meng clan after all. I really don't know what the Meng clan is thinking. They actually gave him a wife like this. In terms of family background, this lady was a humiliation to Meng Heng. Zhu Qingning said, "Fortunately, eldest sister-in-law has a good temper. She has a good relationship with eldest uncle, which is a blessing in disguise. If eldest sister-in-law is a shrewish and vulgar woman, eldest uncle will feel wronged." Nie Sun's face darkened. He had thought that Meng Heng was living a good life, but after getting to know him better, he realized that his life was even worse than that of a bastard from a branch family. Humph, the Mengs mix up the lineal and the concubine. It's obvious that they're not a particular family. It's not surprising that they've gone too far. Nie Sun didn't intend to acknowledge this big brother, but seeing his own blood relative being bullied, he felt unhappy. "What's your plan, Langjun?" Zhu Qingning asked Nie Sun. "I heard that first uncle is very talented. If you two brothers?" Nie Sun shook his head. "That's impossible. Our lord is thirsty for talents and respects them, but have you seen what he thinks of Meng Heng?" Zhu Qingning's heart tightened. Indeed, Huang Song sent people to settle Meng Heng and his wife down and did nothing else. Nie Sun explained, "Meng Heng wants to rely on Lu Shi. If my lord were to snatch him away halfway, it would be hard to explain to Lu Shi." Meng Heng belonged to Jiang Pingji's camp. He had no reason to go to Huang Song's camp. Zhu Qingning sighed. "If eldest uncle submitted to prefecture overseer Lu, then wouldn't you and him?" Before the collapse of the Mengs, the alliance between Huang Song and Jiang Pingji was still reliable. Once the Mengs fell, wouldn't the former allies immediately turn against each other? If they had a falling out, wouldn't this pair of brothers be fighting each other? Just thinking about it made him feel like he was being abused. Nie Sun said calmly, "Furin need not worry about this. If we become enemies in the future, just do your best." So what if they were blood relatives? Meng Heng was no more than a stranger to Nie Sun, so why couldn't he do it? At this point, Nie Sun's lips curled into a light smile as he bit her ear. "If Madame is unable to bear it, why don't you think of Huijie and Feng Jin? Not only are they brothers but they are also very close." Since his brother did not hesitate, How could Nie Sun be soft-hearted? With different standpoints, not to mention biological brothers, even biological fathers and sons could meet on the battlefield. Zhu Qingning looked at her husband with a complicated expression. Was he going to kill his own father and then kill his own brother? Zhu Qingning nestled in Nie Sun's embrace and said softly, "No matter what, the child in my womb and I are on your side." The couple whispered to each other warmly, and the atmosphere was harmonious. Nie Sun did not take the initiative to acknowledge them, but he did his best to take care of Meng Heng and his wife. However, Nie Sun and his wife did not visit them personally. Instead, they sent a servant to deliver many tonics. Without seeing them, Meng Heng naturally did not have the chance to tell Nie Sun that he looked like his mother. Well, even if he saw them, he probably would not be able to say it. It would be awkward to say that Nie Sun looked like his own mother. Just as Nie Sun said, Huang Song coveted Meng Heng, but he did not try to rope him in. Instead, he treated him with good food and drinks, showing his best manners. As the days passed, the war outside became more and more serious. Heda County was located to the north of Haozhou. It was bordered by Zhangzhou, and there was a steep pass at the border called Coldchang Pass. Coldchang Pass was one of the 3 natural strongholds in Zhangzhou, and it was an important gateway for the outside world to enter Zhangzhou. It was easy to defend and hard to attack. "Madam, it's snowing heavily outside. Be careful not to fall." Meng Heng was bored to death at home, so he changed into his military uniform and went hunting in the mountains. He stayed outside for a night and only returned at noon the next day. As soon as he got home, Meng Heng saw his wife wrapped up tightly, standing at the porch and looking at the snow. Hearing his voice, his wife beamed with joy. She lifted the hem of her robe and went forward to welcome him. She said, "Langjun, let me tell you a piece of good news. Magistrate Huang just sent a letter. Magistrate Lu's army is less than 3 days away from Heda County." Meng Heng supported his wife, and a smile appeared on his face. "Cousin, she is coming. That's really good news." Meng Heng said with a smile, "I've prepared some wine today. Let's drink a few cups to celebrate." The cousin Shi, that Meng Heng kept talking about, was now riding on the back of a horse and eating a mouthful of snow. "The snow is really heavy." Jiang Pingji raised her hand and patted the accumulated snow on her shoulder. The snowflakes were huge, like a ball of white fluff. No matter how she patted, the oncoming snowflakes still hit her face. The army advanced slowly in the snow, like a long and black worm wriggling on a piece of white paper. The audience chatted in 2s and 3s. Seeing Jiang Pingji in such a sorry state, they laughed and teased her. "Qin Shi Rian, Streamer, the snow outside is so heavy. Why don't you hide in the carriage for a while?" Quilt Nwanren, "Haha, the commenter above, I'm afraid you don't know what stupid thing the streamer has done. She'd rather be blown to death by the north wind or drown in the snow than run into the carriage. Otherwise, why do you think she's staying outside in the cold wind?" Quilt Shuangi, "What did the streamer do this time? Recently the live stream has been all about marching. It's boring, so I didn't follow her." Fairy Queen's Crimson, #PickNose. "The streamer is good in every aspect, but she's not enlightened when it comes to relationships. If she's stupid, it must have something to do with Beauty CI. The streamer had a stomachache and complained about a stomachache. Others thought she was on her period. Beauty CI also mistakenly thought so. In the end, the streamer took the opportunity to sleep on Beauty C's thigh. The audience was surprised. It was just her period. How could that be considered stupid?" Fairy Queen's Crimson, "Not to mention that the streamer only had a stomachache and didn't have her period. Even if she did, which family's period lasts for a month? You're not mistaken. The streamer used this lame excuse to take advantage of Beauty CI for a month. In the end, she foolishly exposed herself. Was the streamer really a woman in her previous life? Menstruation comes 12 times a year, not once a year. It lasts for a month." Jiang Pingji looked at the bullet screen and secretly rolled her eyes. In her era, women didn't have this thing at all, okay? She only knew that women in ancient times had it, but she didn't know the specifics. Because Lu Shi's body was genetically modified, he didn't have a period at all. Jiang Pingji was even less clear about the details. The stomachache was misunderstood as menstrual pain. She wanted to explain, but she didn't expect him to be so obedient to her. Jiang Pingji simply went with the flow. She took the opportunity to take advantage of him and take advantage of him. In the end, she exposed herself. Wei Si's expression. Chapter 1034. The northern borderline had just been stabilized, and Jiang Pingji had to rush to the front lines with her troops. She could only appoint her confidant to deal with the aftermath of the northern borderline. The northern borderline had been renamed Beizhou and was officially included in Jiang Pingji's sphere of influence. However, for convenience's sake, the northern borderline was still the northern borderline. Sun Wen was appointed as the deputy governor of Beizhou. Qiguan Rang stayed behind in Chongzhou to govern the prefecture and to support Sun Wen to stabilize the northern borderline. Apart from that, Jiang Pingji also asked Fu Wang to stay behind and guard the two prefectures. Jiang Pingji had thought about these decisions carefully. Sun Wen was over 40 years old. Although he was not considered old, he could not run around with the army. They had just gone through a huge battle. Jiang Pingji decided to let Sun Wen have a good vacation and stay behind to handle government affairs. Qiguan Rang was familiar with the affairs of Chongzhou. He was cautious and thorough. He and Sun Wen should work well together. As the commander-in-chief of the three armies, Fu Wang had high prestige in the army. If he guarded the two prefectures, she believed that no one would dare to provoke him. Sun Wen, who did not know anything, was grateful. His arms and legs were old and needed to rest for a while. Only Qiguan Rang looked indifferent. For Jiang Pingji strategists, going to war was equivalent to a paid vacation. Staying at home was worse than death. The Lord really had a true love for Sun Wen. Before conquering the northern borderline, they barely had enough manpower. Now that they had the territory of the northern borderline, they were starting to lack manpower again. Thinking of the days when he had to work overtime, Qiguan Rang fanned his feather fan even more quickly. Jiang Pingji arranged for him to stay in Chongzhou, but the focus of his work was still related to the northern borderline. Although the remnants of the northern borderline were almost wiped out, after the baptism of war, the economy and politics of the northern borderline had suffered a huge blow. Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen guarded the northern borderline together to deal with the aftermath. Only then could Jiang Pingji truly feel at ease and have no worries. Sun Wen was still a newbie. Faced with Jiang Pingji's trust, he was touched and his heart warmed. As for Qiguan Rang, he could already foresee the coming year of dire straits. Before they left, Jiang Pingji threw a problem to the two of them. Previously, in order to create more trouble for the northern borderline, Zixiao encouraged the ordinary herdsmen of the northern borderline to raise rabbits and sheep under my instruction. These two little things look harmless to humans and animals, but once there are too many of them, the northern borderline's pasture will suffer a destructive blow. Fortunately, the scale was still very small, and the rabbits and sheep did not cause too much damage to the northern borderline. This matter will be handed over to the two of you to supervise. The government will do their best to encourage the people to hunt wild rabbits and goats. Qiguan Rang secretly clicked his tongue. He knew very well who came up with the rabbit and sheep strategy. But the Lord took the blame and anxiously defended Zixiao. If this wasn't true love, what was it? Sun Wen frowned and said, if the government buys the rabbits and goats from the herdsmen will only raise more. If that was the case, it would instead look like the government was encouraging the herdsmen to raise rabbits and sheep. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, that's simple. Lower the purchase price of domestic rabbits and goats, and raise the price of wild rabbits and goats. When there's not much profit to be made from domestic animals, the herdsmen will naturally turn their attention to the prey on the grasslands. In carrying out this plan, we must pay attention to those who fish in troubled waters. We can't let them use domesticated rabbits and sheep as wild ones. It was not easy to distinguish between domesticated and wild, but Jiang Pingji believed that this problem would not stump the two people in front of her. In addition to eliminating wild rabbits and goats, Jiang Pingji also asked people to prepare many drought-resistant and cold-resistant plants, such as Chinese sandalwood. Chongzhou's Chinese sandalwood was the main source of Xian paper. Chongzhou alone might not be able to supply it. There were many places in the northern borderline that had similar geographical conditions to Chongzhou. Jiang Pingji felt that they could try to import them. Regarding the aftermath of the northern borderline, Jiang Pingji, Sun Wen, and Qiguan Rang discussed for a long time. After confirming that there were no major problems, they left with the troops. Leaving Sun Wen and Qiguan Rang behind, Jiang Pingji only had Wei Xi and Feng Zhen as her strategists. There were too few people. Passing by Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji took Feng Jin, Meng Han, and Qi Kuang away. Feng Jin learned of this arrangement and said faintly, "My lord is really cold-hearted and heartless." It was not easy for him to have good news with Jingxian. He was anxiously waiting for the second child to germinate, but his lord took him away with a decree. When the war was over, maybe the second child would be weaned. Ever since he followed his lord, he realized that he had not had a good new year for a few years. He was either in the middle of a war or on his way to the battlefield. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and ignored Feng Jin's resentful gaze. We're almost at Hutta County. Feng wrapped himself up into a ball and slightly lifted the curtain of the carriage. The cold wind from outside immediately rushed in and hit him in the face. He spat twice and hurriedly lowered the curtain. Rubbing his hands together to make them warm, Feng used a handkerchief to blow his nose and spoke vaguely. Every time this happens, I envy Jing Rong. Yang Si had brought Dian Yen to Hu County and now represented Jiang Pingji in forming an alliance with Su Bei. This was not the main point. The main point was that Zhe County and Hu County were good places where it was like spring all year round. They would definitely not be as cold as here. At the same time, the scouts at the front sent news that Huang Song had already sent an envoy to wait outside Hutta County for a long time. Jiang Pingji adjusted her armor, flicked the snow off her body, and dismounted. I haven't seen you in a long time. I miss you so much. Huang Song stepped forward to welcome her. He held Jiang Pingji's hand and said warmly, Lanting, it's snowing heavily outside. Let's go into the tent and catch up. Wei Si followed behind Jiang Pingji. His gaze swept past Huang Song's hand. His ink-black brows furrowed imperceptibly, but he quickly regained his composure. After a few years, Lanting has gained Song's admiration. If we destroy the traitors of the northern borderline, the Han borders will be safe for 100 years. Jiang Pingji laughed coldly and said, the northern borderline coveted something they shouldn't have. They deserve this. After entering the main tent, Huang Song took the initiative to let Jiang Pingji sit on the right and he sat on the left as a sign of respect. Jiang Pingji glanced at the people in Huang Song's tent. Other than a few familiar faces, the rest were unfamiliar. It's a joyous occasion today. Song has specially prepared a simple vegetarian banquet. I hope Lanting won't mind. Is there any good wine? He knew Jiang Pingji's temperament. She never liked to beat around the bush. It was easier to gain her favor by being straightforward. Huang Song laughed heartily. Although alcohol is prohibited in the army, why not make an exception for Lanting today? There's plenty of good wine. From what I see, Bogeo has recruited many capable officials and generals in recent years. Huang Song said humbly, it's not as good as the number of talents in Lanting's tent. Each of them is a dragon among men. Jiang Pingji reclined lazily. She held a wine cup in her right hand and rested it on her straightened right knee. Her eyes were slightly tipsy, and the corners of her lips curled into a frivolous smile. Bogeo is being too humble. I wonder if I have the honor to get to know them? This was not a big problem. Of course Huang Song would not refuse. He began with the most trusted strategist in the tent, Feng Ju. This person looks very familiar. He looks like an old friend. He's very amiable. Huang Song introduced Nye Sun. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes slightly. Her languid voice sounded a little intoxicated. She waved her left hand at Nye Sun. I've unknowingly drunk too much. Can you come forward and let me take a closer look? Chapter 1035. It was silent in the tent. Only the crackling of the candles could be heard. Nye Sun's heart skipped a beat as dozens of pairs of eyes stared at him. His expression did not change. He stepped out of the line politely and bowed respectfully. Because the lighting equipment was outdated, the view in the tent was slightly dim. The candlelight flickered and the shadows of the people were indistinct. There was an indescribable sense of hazy beauty. When the young man with a speck of sand between his eyebrows stepped out of the line, the bullet screen in the streaming room gushed like water from a well densely packed. Gaime, oh, so handsome, streamer, I fell in love at first sight again. Midnight epilepsy. He's obviously a very beautiful young man, but I see an indescribable sexiness in him. Mom, come and take a look. This young man in the streaming room is seducing your daughter. I'm so excited that I'm speechless. I'll lick him first. Zawayuo soundless. Mom asked me why I'm licking the screen like crazy. I said the screen is too dirty. Ishio Shiniangxiang, streamer, can you help me get this handsome guy's phone number? I've taken a fancy to him. Xingyuan Miao Miao. Simiai's throne as the #1 beauty is teetering on the brink of collapse. Streamer, why don't you shed all pretense of cordiality with Huang Song and dig this beauty out with a hoe? If you dig her out, the 2 most beautiful flowers in the world will be planted in your fence. Just thinking about it makes me excited. For the audience, ancient gentlemen were only bound to words such as old-fashioned, elegant, and dignified. They never thought that he could be sexy. To describe it in a very vulgar way, Nye Sun was a walking hormone. Needless to say, any teasing words, just one look at him would make one's heart itch. He was wrapped up tightly and dressed properly, but at first glance he was inexplicably sexy. The cinnabar mole between his eyebrows was the finishing touch. It immediately grabbed the attention of others. Huang Song's smile froze. He noticed that the atmosphere in the main tent was a little stiff, so he wanted to open his mouth to smooth things over. What a joke. They were a gang of scoundrels who had been to brothels and drank wine together. How could he not know Jiang Pingji's bad character? Before Huang Song could speak, Jiang Pingji tilted her neck and all the wine in the goblet slipped down her throat. Her eyes were misty. Qingyun, could it be that there is a tiger sitting in front of you? Jiang Pingji raised her hand to her forehead. Her cheeks were flushed. She seemed to be drunk. The candlelight in the tent is very dim. I can't see clearly. You're swaying back and forth. It's too strenuous. Huang Song's heart sank. He couldn't tell if Jiang Pingji was really drunk or pretending to be drunk. He could only give Nie Sun a look. Nie Sun pursed his lips and took small steps forward, but he was panicking inside. Nie Qingyun greets Lu Prefecture's governor. Her voice was like pearls falling onto a jade plate, clear and mellow, pleasant to the ear. Jiang Pingji put down the wine cup and stood up from the table unsteadily. She took a few steps toward Nie Sun. The veins on Huang Song's eyebrows twitched, and he hurriedly followed. He did not want Jiang Pingji to do anything overboard to her officials. Scholars and strategists, which one of them was not proud and arrogant? If he was taken as a woman and molested in front of everyone, even if he didn't show it on the surface, he would secretly bear a grudge. Nie Qingyun? Jiang Pingji let out a small hiccup and leaned close to Nie Sun's face. She squinted her eyes strenuously, as if she was trying to recognize something from his face. Everyone in the tent had different thoughts. They were so nervous that they did not dare to breathe, but the audience in the streaming room was howling. The streamer was really considerate. With such a close look, there was an illusion of being close to a beauty. Wei Ci had already been booked by the streamer. One should not bully a friend's wife. The audience in the streaming room could only wring their hands and sigh. Now that a beauty who was as beautiful as Wei Ci had arrived, how could the 850,000 hearts in the streaming room be restrained? This name. It sounds very familiar. Jiang Pingji scrutinized him carefully. Finally, she was willing to move away from him. Many people's hearts were at ease. If Jiang Pingji took a fancy to Nie Sun's appearance and insisted on asking Huang Song for him, it would be awkward. Wei Ci wore a dignified and appropriate smile on his face. Qingyun is my teacher's son-in-law. Of course my lord will find his name familiar. Master Yuanjing's son-in-law? Jiang Pingji turned around and returned to her seat. She muttered, doesn't that make him Wunyang's husband? Wei Ci said, my lord is right. Jiang Pingji smiled and praised him. Master Yuanjing's eyes are still so sharp. I wonder where he found such a treasure. In a few words, Wei Ci and Jiang Pingji changed the topic. The atmosphere in the tent was much more relaxed. The atmosphere here was relaxed, but Jiang Pingji heard the sound of hearts breaking in the streaming room. My Xiang Cha-Cha, QAQ, why is it like this? The pretty brother is actually married, Hanyan Ningming. Nie Sun doesn't look like a teenager. He's at least 25 or 26. Which man in ancient times didn't get married and have a family? Does he really think this is an ancient romance novel? Will the male supporting character remain chaste for the female lead? Even so, my heart hurts. The audience was immersed in the grievous news that their Prince Charming was already taken. Huang Song secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Jiang Pingji's attention was not on Nie Sun, everything else was fine. He was not worried that Jiang Pingji would steal him away. He was worried that Jiang Pingji, who was obsessed with appearances, would covet Nie Sun's beauty. Nie Sun received Huang Song's signal and returned to his seat calmly. Apart from this small interlude, the atmosphere of the entire banquet was harmonious. Jiang Pingji was in a rather good mood. The wine in the goblet never stopped flowing. Huang Song was not the Huang Song of the past. He would control himself when drinking and would not get too drunk. Jiang Pingji sighed in her heart. When she competed with Huang Song and Fengju in the past, they would be so drunk that they would hide under the low table and be unconscious. Now they had grown up and were more rational. Naturally, they would not indulge in drinking. They would not do it now, and there would be no chance in the future. I'm drunk. My head hurts. Jiang Pingji put down the goblet and hurriedly waved her hands. I feel uncomfortable drinking. Seeing this, Huang Song continued, since you can't drink anymore, let's not drink anymore. Get someone to help you down to rest and sober up. Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and nodded slightly. Since their lord had left, Wei Ci and the others naturally could not continue to stay. They all found excuses to leave. The banquet was over and the strong smell of wine lingered in the tent. Captain Yuan Chong muttered, "I knew that Mr. Nie's beauty was unparalleled, but I didn't expect that even the magistrate of Liuzhou could not resist you." Jiang Pingji's behavior at the beginning was obviously taking advantage of being drunk to flirt and lust for his beauty. Yuan Chang's voice was not loud, but Nie Sun, who was sitting not far away, heard it clearly. His face darkened slightly. Yuan Chong was not only Huang Song's fan, but he was also Huang Song's cousin. Nie Sun could not refute him. Yuan Chong still had a sense of propriety, but Yuan Chang's second uncle, Yuan Xan, was not so restrained. Chapter 1036. Seeing that Yuan Xan was going overboard, Nie Sun slammed the table with a gloomy face. The force was so great that even the bowls and chopsticks on the table shook. Everyone in the tent was silent, even their breathing seemed to be concealed. "Do you think I'm wrong?" Yuan Xan was a burly old general with a thick beard on his coarse face. His appearance was rough. He sat there like a small mountain as wide as two Nie Suns. He spoke in a low, muffled voice that was as loud and powerful as a large bell. "I forgot to restrain myself just now. I drank too much and lost my composure in public. Please punish me, my lord." Huang Song's stern gaze swept over Yuan Xan as a silent warning. Then he said pleasantly, "If that's the case, I'll go back to sober up first." Nie Sun got up and left. He faintly heard Yuan Xan's cold snort behind him. He secretly clenched his fists. The cold wind outside blew on his face, dispersing the lingering smell of alcohol around him. Where there were people, there was no lack of conflicts and disputes. Especially in a group with a complicated power structure, it was easier to breed discord. Civil officials and military generals were two conflicting groups that were difficult to reconcile. Nie Sun was too good-looking, so it was inevitable that he would be looked down upon and snubbed by people, especially military generals. They usually knew how to restrain themselves, but now that they had drunk too much, they unconsciously showed it. This was not a big conflict, and Nie Sun did not take it to heart. What worried him was Jiang Pingji's reaction. Others thought that Jiang Pingji was attracted to him, but Nie Sun did not think so. In terms of appearance, Wei Ci, who worked in Jiang Pingji's tent, was even better than him. Other than that, Nie Sun could not find anything wrong with him. He just felt very flustered, which made him lose his sense of propriety. On the other side, Jiang Pingji was supported by Wei Ci back to the bedroom where she was staying. "Now that there's no one around, my lord, you don't have to continue pretending, right?" How could he not know how much his lord could drink? The drunk, Jiang Pingji leaned against him. When she heard this, she could not help but smile delightedly. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and with a little force she rolled onto the bed with Wei Ci, pressing half of her body on top of him. "My lord." Wei Ci was so angry that his face turned slightly green. He raised his hand and tried to push her away. "Zixiao, what happened to you Xin was indeed my fault. Don't be so cold and heartless." Jiang Pingji looked like she was hugging a large doll. She rubbed his neck and mumbled, "You've been angry for so many days. It's time to cool down." It would have been better if she had not said it. Wei Ci was even angrier after she had said it. Was he such a narrow-minded person? "I'm not angry because of that." Wei Ci liked cleanliness. Even if he drank alcohol, he would only drink 2 cups and rarely touch the smell of alcohol. Jiang Pingji drank a lot of wine. She was like a moving wine jar. He almost fainted from the smell. "Then is it because of Nie Qingyun?" Jiang Pingji smiled slyly. "Is Zixiao jealous?" Wei Ci said, "What's there to be jealous of? Nie Sun has been targeted by the Lord. She can't wait to pity him." He knew Jiang Pingji too well. Her actions just now were obviously to trick Nie Sun. It was a pity that Nie Sun didn't realize it. Jiang Pingji let go of his neck and rolled around like a child. She was drunk. Wei Ci was speechless. The Lord was really regressing as she lived. He secretly facepalmed. It was worth it to go along with her wishes. Otherwise, if others saw her childish side, where would the dignity of the Lord be? "How does the Lord plan to trick Nie Sun?" Wei Ci asked. "I'm slow-witted. I can't see through the Lord's arrangements." Jiang Pingji stopped tormenting him. She smiled and said, "This Nie Sun is very likely to be my poor cousin." Wei Ci was surprised. "Cousin?" Jiang Pingji said, "Zixiao, you know that my father's legal wife isn't my biological mother. She's my mother's concubine sister, my aunt. Before she married my father, she was Meng Zhan's legal wife. She and Meng Zhan had 2 legitimate sons. One was the eldest cousin, Meng Heng, and the other was the second cousin. When the second cousin was born, Meng Zhan's favorite concubine also gave birth to an illegitimate son. Meng Zhan favored his concubine over his wife and confused the illegitimate son. He actually marked the illegitimate son as the legitimate son and threw the legitimate second son to his favorite concubine. However, his favorite concubine had a vicious heart. She sent someone to deal with the legitimate second son. My aunt said that the second cousin was born with a cinnabar between his eyebrows. It's very easy to recognize him. Wei Si frowned. You identified him as Meng Erlang just based on a cinnabar between his eyebrows? Jiang Pingji smiled. Of course not. The most important thing is Nie Sun's appearance. He looks very much like my aunt. Similar appearance and the same cinnabar. Just based on these 2 points, Jiang Pingji dared to confirm Nie Sun's background. Wei Si's mind whirred. He said, I heard Yumo say that Nie Sun came to Dongqing from Zhongzhou to look for blood relatives. In other words, Nie Sun was very likely to be Jiang Pingji's second cousin. Jiang Pingji said, I can feel it. He seems to know this too, but he didn't come forward to acknowledge me. Wei Si's eyebrows twitched violently. He suddenly thought of the pitiful Yang Si in his previous life. In his previous life, Yang Si obediently stayed in Huang Song's tent as a strategist. At most, he was a little greedy. It was such a small flaw that the Lord actually grasped and used it as a breakthrough to drive a wedge between Huang Song and Yang Si. Could it be? Jiang Pingji snorted and laughed. If Nie Sun follows Bogeo, it will be difficult to make a move in the future. I am a person who does not hold back. If I accidentally kill him, my aunt will be very sad if she finds out. Just in case, it's better to help one's own people. Wei Si was speechless. His heart ached even more for Nie Sun. What should he do? My lord wants to drive a wedge between Huang Song and Nie Sun? Jiang Pingji gasped and blinked innocently. Zixiao, why are you speaking so harshly? What do you mean by driving a wedge? Do I look like the kind of restless third child who likes to poach others? Bogeo and Qingyun have a close relationship. I won't do such a wicked thing. Wei Si was speechless. Even a ghost wouldn't believe a word of what you said. Jiang Pingji stopped joking and said calmly, Bogeo has a suspicious personality, but being suspicious doesn't mean he suspects everything. If I drive a wedge between them right from the start, the effect will be counterproductive. After all, Bogeo isn't a fool. He has also grown up and is no longer the fair-weather friend who can be easily bullied. I don't know how Nie Sun found out about our relationship, but he didn't tell Huang Song. Nie Sun hid the truth to avoid arousing Huang Song's suspicions. However, the more secretive he is, the easier it is for others to suspect him. She laughed coldly. If he doesn't confess some things early on, he won't be able to say them when he wants to because he'll lose the best opportunity. He didn't confess earlier but chose to confess when others suspected him. Wouldn't this attract suspicion? Wei Si sighed. What could he say? No one who was targeted by his lord would have a good ending. Jiang Pingji said, however, our current enemy is the Meng family of Zhangzhou. I have the intention to plot against Bogeo and Qingyun, but I have to pay attention to the timing. Wei Si's face was cold. She was indeed very careful about the timing, but it didn't stop her from planting a seed of suspicion in Huang Song and the others. Chapter 1037. Nie Sun left angrily. The atmosphere in Huang Song's tent was a little awkward and boring. The anger in Yuan Xian's heart did not subside. Even his thick beard could not conceal the ridicule on his face. Nie Sun's appearance was too beautiful, and men were popular at the moment. Yuan Xian always felt that Nie Sun was not a decent person, and did not have a good impression of him. In addition, the most important point was that after Nie Sun came to Huang Song's camp, his contributions did not match the importance he was given. The Lord only thinks highly of him because he is Master Yuanjing's son-in-law. Yuan Xian was a somewhat crude and boorish fellow. He was convinced by Qing Jing and Feng Ju because these two gentlemen were indeed very talented. They had helped Huang Song conquer Haozhou and even spread his influence to other domains. They could be said to be true meritorious subjects. In comparison, Nie Sun was a little off. If Nie Sun was just an ordinary advisor, Yuan Xian wouldn't hate him so much. However, Nie Sun's contributions to the outside world were not great, but he was favored quite a lot. This made Yuan Xian have no choice but to think in the wrong direction. Humph, you have quite a temper. Yuan Xian snorted coldly and gulped down the wine in his cup. The more he thought about it, the angrier he felt. Yuan Xian felt that it was not enough to drink like this, so he simply went to the wine jar and drank like a whale. His actions attracted the attention of others. Yuan Chong, who was sitting near him, advised in a low voice, "Uncle, we are in need of manpower now. Our Lord still needs to rely on the military counselors. If you have a conflict with military counselor Nya at this time, won't it put our Lord in a difficult position? After hearing this, Yuan Xn put down his wine cup heavily. What did I do to him? Yuan Xn straightened his neck and said, didn't I just say a few words to him and he became aggrieved? You're a man, why are you being so unreasonable? Yuan Xn said whatever he wanted to say, but he didn't humiliate Nye Sun. Nye Sun actually threw his face at him. Thinking of this, the anger in Yuan Xn's heart seemed to have been doused with alcohol, burning more and more fiercely. Uncle, you can't say that. Yuan Xn wasn't bad at fighting, but his personality was too straightforward and impulsive. He only spoke because he was happy and didn't care about the situation. Just now, when he teased Nye Sun, it was only because he thought so in his heart. There wasn't much malice in his words. But in Nye Sun's ears, these words were filled with malice. Who wouldn't be angry after hearing it? On one side was a useful general who was also his uncle, and on the other side was a trusted advisor. It was quite difficult for Huang Song to be stuck in the middle. Yuan Chong still wanted to mediate, but Huang Song, who was sitting at the head of the table, couldn't stand it anymore. Enough. Huang Song's face carried a hint of anger, which immediately subdued Yuan Xn. The latter lowered his head in embarrassment and drank his wine, not daring to lose his temper again. At the end of the banquet, Feng Ju and Qing Jing left one after another. The other strategists and generals also dispersed. Qing Jing took a few quick steps to catch up with Feng Ju. Based on my understanding of Lu Shi, he is not a bad disciple who indulges in beauty. Feng Ju was not surprised by Qing Jing's appearance. He said in a low voice, of course she's not. Not only is she not, but she's also as cunning as a schemer. His second brother stayed behind in Wanzhou during the Beijiang campaign. But now you've brought second brother and Meng Han here. How can this be good intentions? At the banquet, he saw his second brother, Feng Jin, whom he had not seen for many years. Although Feng Ju looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. Meng Han used to be a military officer in Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. The Mengs of Tsang Prefecture caused him to lose his wife and daughter. It was reasonable for Jiang Pingji to bring Meng Han along. However, why did she specially bring Feng Jin here? Feng Ju did not dare to think too deeply. In fact, Feng Ju and Qing Jing thought too much of Jiang Pingji. If she was so evil, she would have dragged Qing Cheng and Qing Yuan along. Qing Cheng was Qing Jing's nephew, and Qing Yuan was Qing Jing's grandnephew. Qing Jing frowned. Qing Yun is from Zhongzhou. He has never been to Dongqing before this. It's impossible for him to have any interaction with Lu Shi. Feng Ju looked down. Don't forget, although Qing Yun is from Zhongzhou, his ancestral bloodline is in Dongqing. Nye Sun's search for relatives was not a secret at all. Qing Jing's eyebrows twitched violently. You mean, Qing Yun is related to Lu Shi? If that's the case, why would Qing Yun hide it from us? They were certain that it was the first time Lu Shi and Nye Sun had met. If the two were related by blood, there was no reason that Lu Shi would know but Nye Sun did not. It's not that. Don't forget, Master Yuan Jing is Qing Yun's father-in-law. He's even a teacher in Lu Shi's territory. Feng Ju added coldly, Tiske. No matter what he's up to, we have to be on guard. Jiang Pingji did things as she pleased. Although Huang Song had formed an alliance with her, the alliance was just a verbal one. There was no deep entanglement of interests. Without a certain entanglement of interests as a guarantee, such an alliance was too fragile. It was like a flower in the mirror or the moon in the water. Jiang Pingji flirted with Nye Sun at the banquet. This alerted the strategists in Huang Song's tent. The generals were still in a daze. As the initiator of this incident, Jiang Pingji did not make any further moves. It was as if she was really tempted by his lust. She did not have time to care about Nye Sun at that moment because she received an unexpected visitation card. Cousin Heng, I haven't seen you for many years. You're even more charming now. Jiang Pingji looked at Meng Heng. To be precise, it was the second time she had seen Meng Heng after transmigrating for so many years. Thinking of her cousin's experience, Jiang Pingji sympathized with him. Sympathy was sympathy, but if he stood on the opposite side of her, Jiang Pingji would not be soft-hearted. Meng Heng suddenly sat down. His posture was tall and straight. He was as elegant as bamboo and had a strong demeanor. Hearing Jiang Pingji's greeting, he laughed bitterly and said frankly, Cousin Shi, are you wondering why Heng is here? Jiang Pingji said, I am indeed a little puzzled. Cousin Heng is not in Songzhou. Instead, when Meng Heng raised his head, she clearly saw that the whip mark on his face had not faded. The mark on his left eyelid was the deepest. As a son, it is not appropriate to talk about the elders. But what my father has done is indeed against the natural order. Heng only hopes to make up for it. Meng Heng got up from the banquet and walked to the center of the hall with heavy steps. He bowed deeply to Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. Cousin Heng, you? He had never imagined that this cousin of his would actually join his side. What did Meng Zhan do to anger the heavens and the people? Meng Heng, who had a gentle and dignified personality, was forced to put righteousness before family? Cousin Shi, please grant my wish. Meng Heng bowed deeply again. How could Jiang Pingji not agree? Meng Heng's joining was like God's help. Apart from talent, Meng Heng was the Zongzi of the Mengs. Even if he was not favored, his understanding of Cangzhou was unparalleled. If Meng Zhan knew that Meng Heng had sided with her, would he still be able to keep his face? Cousin Heng, please get up. You're making me sick by doing this. Jiang Pingji stood up and helped Meng Heng up. She acted like a close sibling. She said with concern, but I am curious about one thing. Cousin Heng is the Zongzi of the Mengs. Why? Chapter 1038. Jiang Pingji listened attentively to Meng Heng's narration. She could not help but frown. She knew that Meng Heng wasn't treated well in Cangzhou, but she didn't expect his situation to be this bad. All of this had to start from Meng Heng's childhood. Back then, Gu Zhen could not even take care of herself, much less her eldest son. Gu Min and her husband took Gu Zhen away from the Meng residence and let Meng Zhan and Gu Zhen divorce, but they could not take Meng Heng away. Meng Heng struggled to live to the age of enlightenment. He did not live like a Zongzi. Instead, he lived like the most unfavored son of a concubine. From the age of 4 to 8, he felt that Meng Zhan's favorite concubine was looking at him more and more unfriendly. In order to escape from the persecution of his concubine, Meng Heng, who was only 8 years old, found a way out for himself. Late at night, he paid a visit to the teacher who taught at the family school. From the teacher, he obtained a letter of recommendation for Meng Heng to go to the Dongyang private school in Shangjing. Although it was said to be a student, it was actually a hostage. The Meng family of Cangzhou held the lifeline of the horse farm in Dongqing. How could the emperor be at ease? He was constantly thinking of taking back control. Of course, the Meng family would not compromise. But if they did not, it would be hard to explain to the royal family. Meng Heng took advantage of this opportunity to go to Shangjing with the recommendation of the teacher. While studying, he also took the initiative to be a hostage, to ease the conflict between the emperor and the Meng family. With this reason, Meng Heng also received the immunity medallion. No matter how much Meng Zhan's favorite concubine hated Meng Heng, she couldn't really kill him. Not long after Jiang Pingji and Feng Jin met, she heard news about Meng Heng from him. What had Feng Jin said about Meng Heng? If Meng Heng hadn't accidentally revealed his identity, many of his classmates wouldn't have known that Meng Heng, who lived a simple life, was actually the Zongzi of the Meng family in Song Prefecture. Other than returning to Cangzhou for a few days during the new year, Meng Heng basically stayed in Shangjing to study. He stayed for 10 years. In the assessment 8 years ago, Meng Heng had wanted to enter the top 3 and become an official. In this way, he wouldn't have to worry about Meng Zhan's favorite concubine when he returned to the Mengs. Who knew that Meng Liang's scandal would be exposed, and the Meng county governor's office would be burned to the ground by Meng Hun and his men. Then the Tsang prefecture mutiny happened. How could this scandal be suppressed? As Meng Liang's eldest brother, Meng Heng was unfortunately affected and failed the test. Not to mention the top 3, Meng Heng couldn't even enter the top 100. After losing Meng Liang, the Meng family thought of him. More than a dozen letters to his family called him back. Meng Heng set off from Shangjing. On his way there, he met Jiang Pingji, who was on her way to Langya County. It was the first time the two cousins had met. Meng Heng, who had returned to the Mengs, felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles when he saw the no longer prosperous Cangzhou and the tired and poor people. The Meng family of Cangzhou used to be the guardian of the people of this land. Since when did the Meng family become the nightmare of the people and the demons who exploited them? Meng Heng tried to make amends and restore the reputation of the Mengs. However, the head of the family was Meng Zhan, and Meng Zhan did not like him at all. In this era where the patriarch was the king, Meng Heng's struggles and hard work were a joke. As a son, the only thing he could do was admonish him. He had tried many times, but the results were not ideal. He didn't know why, but Meng Zhan's attitude toward him was getting colder and colder. He could even see the deep hatred and murderous intent in Meng Zhan's eyes. To be honest, my lord, although Heng's ancestral hall was removed and his surname was removed, Meng Heng is Meng Heng. I dare not forget the teachings of my ancestors. Meng Heng said, if the Mengs of Zhangzhou are done for, it is also fate. I dare not have the slightest resentment. I only ask for my lord's grace. Jiang Pingji looked at Meng Heng and guessed his request. You want me to give you the surname Meng and keep the ancestral hall of the Mengs? Jiang Pingji could not understand the persistence of people in ancient times to pass on their surnames and bloodlines. Although she did not understand it, she respected it. Meng Heng's eyes flashed with surprise and joy. He bowed his head and said, I sincerely ask my lord to grant my wish. There were many people with the surname Meng in the world, but not all of them were from the Mengs of Zhangzhou. Take Wuxia as an example. The Weis of Langyi were separated from Bianzhou and Zhongzhou and moved to Langyi to establish their own clan. Both were from the Weis, but when it came to their ancestors, one was from Bianzhou and the other from Langyi. Meng Heng planned to establish his own clan. When the time came, the Mengs of Zhangzhou would be annihilated by Jiang Pingji, but the Mengs would not be completely wiped out because he would still be alive. Jiang Pingji would naturally agree to such a small request. Okay, I'll do as Cousin Heng says. Thank you, my lord. After discussing official matters, Jiang Pingji quietly changed the topic to Meng Heng's recent life. She asked him if he had any contact with the people under Huang Song's command. It was relatively easy for smart people to talk to smart people. Meng Heng immediately understood that Jiang Pingji wanted to poach him in private. But, Meng Heng said awkwardly, I don't have much contact with the people under Magistrate Huang's command. The only one I have a friendship with is Nie Qingyun. It was indeed Nie Sun. Jiang Pingji's heart flashed with a hint of understanding. Nie Sun really knew that he was Meng Heng's biological brother, but he had never acknowledged him. Jiang Pingji continued to fish for information. She learned from Meng Heng that Nie Sun had taken care of him these days. My lord, do you fancy Nie Qingyun? Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. We hit it off at first sight. Meng Heng had an idea. He whispered, Magistrate Huang is suspicious but calm. I'm afraid it's not feasible to sow discord. Jiang Pingji said, that's why I need Cousin Heng to do it. Nie Qingyun has taken care of Cousin Heng many times. Cousin Heng should return the favor. Nie Sun had taken care of Meng Heng many times. Meng Heng had a legitimate excuse to return the favor. Wouldn't the two families be closer if they kept in touch? When they were close to a certain extent, how could Huang Song not think too much about revealing their relationship as brothers? Jiang Pingji did not hesitate at all when she swung her hoe to poach her brother. Meng Heng sighed in his heart. Although it was not good to trick Nie Sun, both of them had their own masters. Heng obeys. On the second day after Jiang Pingji arrived in Heda County, the Meng's garrison troops stationed at Hanchang Pass could not remain calm. Huang Song is hard enough to deal with. Why is there another Lu Shi? The general on guard slammed the table with a thud. His expression was ferocious. The people below him kept quiet. General, we can attack Heda County and defend Hanchang Pass. There's no need to be afraid. The general on guard was worried. Who didn't know this? But that was Lu Shi. Lu Shi, who had just destroyed the entire northern borderline with his troops. When the soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass heard that Lu Shi had appeared among their enemies, their morale plummeted. This was what was worrying. If there was only Huang Song, they could still take the initiative to come out of the pass to fight and force the enemy to retreat to Heda County. Now that there was Lu Shi, who was like a wolf and a tiger, not to mention taking the initiative to attack, it was good enough that they did not cling to Hanchang Pass to defend it. Report this matter to the higher-ups as soon as possible and ask for a decision. The enemy is coming in menacingly. I'm afraid they won't be easy to deal with. The general on guard did not attack rashly. His mind was still very clear. The most important thing at the moment was to defend Hanchang Pass and wait patiently for instructions from the higher-ups. Chapter 1039. I really don't know what's there to discuss. Can't we just fight our way over? Yuan Xen lost his patience when he heard that there was no progress after an hour of discussion. No matter how we challenge them, those bastards from Zhangzhou don't respond. They were all scared out of their wits, so why would they take the initiative to come out? If they don't want to fight, can't we fight them? Yuan Xen did not deliberately suppress his voice, so everyone in the tent could hear him. Huang Song looked embarrassed and he looked a little embarrassed. The generals under his command were impulsive and reckless, which made him lose face as well. Moreover, Yuan Xen was his uncle from the same clan, so he had no choice but to help clean up after him. Jiang Pingji wasn't angry. Instead, she smiled and said, "That's true. The general guarding Hanchang Pass is afraid of the military strength of the two families, so he doesn't come out. They have the danger pass to rely on, so they naturally aren't afraid. But we can't afford to drag this on. However, the Great Cold Mountain Pass is easy to defend and hard to attack. If the two clans take the initiative to send out their troops, they will fall right into the enemy's trap. Who knows how much of a price they will have to pay to attack such a dangerous pass. Yuan Xan was secretly warned by Huang Song. He still felt a little guilty, but he didn't expect Jiang Pingji to stand up for him. However, even though Jiang Pingji tried to smooth things over, Yuan Xan did not stop while he was ahead. His personality was very stubborn, and he would not easily change his instincts. Yuan Xan did not have a good impression on Jiang Pingji. Even if she was magnanimous and forgave him, he would not be grateful. Instead, he felt that Jiang Pingji's temper was too soft and easy to manipulate. Yes. This was probably what it meant to be a kind person would be bullied and a kind horse would be ridden. For the sake of Huang Song, Jiang Pingji did not argue with Yuan Xan, but Yuan Xan refused to quit while he was ahead. Who doesn't know these principles? Although I am old, I am not deaf. I still remember what the advisors have said. Yuan Xan said with some arrogance. Though Cold Chang Pass is a dangerous pass that is easy to defend and hard to attack, it is not impregnable. To take down Hanchang Pass, we naturally have to rely on the hard work of the soldiers. We can't just rely on a few people moving their mouths and the Hanchang Pass will change hands. Although Jiang Pingji was fighting in an away game, Huang Song wanted to express his respect for her. The entire military meeting was led by Jiang Pingji. The strategists who spoke just now were basically people on Jiang Pingji's side. Yuan Xan's words were no different from a slap in the face. Huang Song's face darkened. He knew that this uncle of his had a bad temper, but he didn't expect him to go crazy regardless of the situation. Little did they know that Yuan Xan couldn't stand it either. Heda County was a territory under Huang Song's rule. Huang Song had to endure the indignation of allowing others to dictate what to do in his own territory and enjoy the limelight. Jiang Pingji smiled faintly and looked at Yuan Xan coldly. Yuan Xan felt a chill run down his spine under her gaze, as if an evil chill had spread from his feet to his brain, calming him down quite a bit. He thought that Jiang Pingji would fly into a rage, but she turned around and asked Huang Song. Bogeo, can you introduce this warrior to me? Huang Song's heart thumped, but he didn't dare to speak up for Yuan Xan. In this situation he vaguely felt that he had returned to a few years ago. He was still shrouded in the shadow of Jiang Pingji's violence. He is Yuan Xin Song's uncle. He is loyal and upright, but his actions are a bit reckless and impulsive. He still needs more tempering. Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. He has a good personality but he offends people easily. Bogeo, you haven't had an easy time all these years. In her opinion, the Lord was like the head of a kindergarten. Her subordinates were all problematic children, and Yuan Xan was the one with the worst temper. It really hasn't been easy. Huang Song laughed bitterly and self-deprecatingly said, I only hope that he hasn't offended Lanting too much. From such a familiar tone, everyone knew that the two of them were very close and private. Yuan Xan had offended so many people but they could still talk and laugh. How could their relationship not be good? Jiang Pingji smiled and winked at Huang Song. I wouldn't go so far as to offend him too much, Jiang Pingji said. In the past, the imperial court valued literature and restrained the military. How many men from the Wu family were like delicate, beautiful women? If the soldiers at the border were like Captain Yuan Xan, how would the motley crew of the northern borderline dare to attack the border? In her opinion, the civil officials were the brains and knees of the country, while the military generals were the backbone of the country. Both were equally important. She spent years training an army that was full of courage, but there were not many generals who satisfied her. Yuan Xan was indeed hot-tempered. If he hadn't offended her, Jiang Pingji would have admired him. Of course, she would get back at him for what he had done today. Huang Song secretly heaved a sigh of relief and followed Jiang Pingji's lead to divert the original topic. Yuan Xan felt like he had punched cotton. He didn't feel good. Throughout the meeting he was somewhat silent. Without Yuan Xan's interruptions, everyone slowly came up with a clear battle plan. However, Yuan Xan's words still made them pay attention. The second half of the meeting was much quieter. The terrain of Hanchang Pass was treacherous. It seemed like one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. It was definitely not advisable to attack by force. The Mengs, a formidable enemy, was still eyeing them. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song couldn't afford to lose too many soldiers at Hanchang Pass. After some discussion, everyone decided to lure the snake out of its hole. Since attacking by force was not advisable, they could only let the general in charge of Hanchang Pass lead his troops out of the pass. Then they could take advantage of the fact that the pass was empty to launch a sneak attack. As he listened, Meng Hun vaguely felt that it was somewhat familiar. Back then, didn't the Lord and the others use this strategy to deal with General Fu? Meng Hun clearly remembered that the Lord and the others had tricked Fu Wang into leading his troops out of the pass. Then they had taken the opportunity to break through Jiamen Pass. Feng Zhen said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if the strategy is new or old as long as it works." Meng Hun secretly frowned. The general in charge of Hanchang Pass is timid and conservative. They would rather guard the pass than send troops out easily. If the battle dragged on, Jiang Pingji would be the one to suffer. After all, it was a long battle and an away game. The pressure on the transportation of grain was great. It couldn't withstand a long battle. As long as Huang Song and Jiang Pingji's alliance had problems, the Mengs and Sangzhou could find a chance to attack them one by one. "That's why we need to lure the snake out of its hole," Feng Zhen said. "It's the New Year's Day soon. What should we eat?" Meng Hun, was Feng Longzi possessed by Yangtze? The battle was more important. Why was he thinking about food? After a while, Meng Hun finally understood the deeper meaning of Feng Zhen's words. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song set up camp every day to challenge the enemy. Just as they had feared, the general in charge of Hanchang Pass was a coward. They weren't annoyed. Instead, they rewarded the troops with fat cattle, sheep, and fine wine. Every night, they lit a bonfire and sang and danced. The soldiers drank until they were drunk. Such a lively scene naturally couldn't escape the eyes of the scouts of Hanchang Pass. The soldiers on the city wall were all dumbfounded. "Don't be impatient. This is clearly their plan to lure the enemy. We can't fall for it." Chapter 1040. He was talking about luring the enemy, but he wasn't sure about it. If it was really a luring tactic, how could it be like this for half a month? Every morning he received reports from scouts that Lu Shi's army and Huang Song's army had another night of fun. The general's mood was like a steamer. On one hand, he told himself that it was the enemy's luring tactic to lure them out of Hanchang Pass. On the other hand, he couldn't help but wonder, maybe it wasn't a luring tactic. Maybe the enemy was too arrogant? At first he was still very vigilant and determined. However, as he missed the opportunity to annihilate the enemy again and again, he couldn't stay calm anymore. According to the reports from scouts, Huang Song's and Lu Shi's armies were partying all night, except for basic patrols. They weren't on guard at all. If he was braver and took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, the enemy might have been wiped out. So what if it was bait set by the enemy? They were so drunk that they didn't have the strength to fight. If they launched a sneak attack, Lu Shi would be shooting himself in the foot. Faced with a dilemma, the general of Hanchang Pass was hesitant. He could only watch as the enemy camp burned brightly. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song predicted that the general of Hanchang Pass would be suspicious and wouldn't send troops easily. In order to put on a more realistic act and to let the soldiers relax and have a good new year, they had really gone crazy in the first few days. What a carefree and happy day. Feng Zhen was wearing a crown and a belt. He wore a lacquered gauze crown on his head. It was proper attire, but his waist was loose and his clothes were crooked, revealing his thin collarbone and a small part of his chest. He leaned against the table and sat casually. He held a wine cup in his hand and was drunk. His cheeks were red. Today was New Year's Eve. As usual, they had to gather for a New Year's banquet. It was a festive day, so they naturally had to wear formal clothes. Even Feng Zhen, the prodigal son, took out the clothes that he hadn't worn many times. If every day is a New Year's Eve, what regrets would there be in life? Feng Zhen sighed. His peach blossom eyes were filled with tears and seemed to be flowing. Feng Jin frowned and warned Feng Zhen in a low voice. "Hanchang Pass can't wait any longer. They'll probably make a move soon. You should restrain yourself." At first, Feng Jin really didn't like this unruly colleague who risked his life to court death. But now he let him be. She only hoped that he wouldn't make a fool of himself during the annual banquet. Feng Jin was also dressed in formal attire, but he and Feng Zhen were two completely different styles. If one were to say that Feng was a wanton man who indulged himself in the wilderness, then Feng Jin was a refined and courteous gentleman. The former's sitting posture was casual, while the latter's hair was neatly combed. New Year's banquet, burp? Feng Zhen burped and said drunkenly, "Didn't the Lord say that we should act freely and not be restrained?" Feng Jin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Feng Zhen said slyly, "Bestowing the same full moon, I wonder what's the situation on Wenjing and Zaidao's side? When he thought about how he was enjoying himself while his colleagues spent the holidays with a pile of bamboo slips, Feng Jin felt his whole body relax. Feng Jin said with a headache, "You should stop. If he liked to attract hatred so much, sooner or later he would be beaten to death with a gunny sack." Feng Jin smiled and pulled Li Yun, who was beside him. He said, "Hanmei, pour the wine. We won't go home until we're drunk tonight." It wasn't that there were no conflicts between the civil and military officials under Jiang Pingji's banner, but the conflicts weren't that obvious. Feng Longzi often hooked up with the military officials to drink in secret. Li Yun, the little angel, was humble and eager to learn. He often asked for guidance from a few teachers. With more communication, the estrangement and conflicts between them decreased. In addition, Jiang Pingji was skilled in both literature and martial arts. She tried her best to be fair and bring out the strengths of the civil and military officials. She didn't favor one and discriminate against the other. This made the overall atmosphere harmonious, and the civil and military officials got along well. Even if there were conflicts between the two sides, most of them would be resolved in private and wouldn't be brought out in the open. Looking at the harmonious situation between the civil and military officials in the tent, Feng Ju, who was the messenger to Jiang Pingji, felt upset. Most of Huang Song's military officials were from the Yuanshi family. They were considered Huang Song's clansmen. The two had a close relationship. Although it was a good thing to not avoid enemies and not avoid relatives, the military officials under Huang Song seemed to have a tendency to unite and fight against outsiders. Under Huang Song's suppression, they didn't cause any trouble, but everything couldn't be compared. Feng Ju drank a few glasses of wine on behalf of Huang Song and Jiang Pingji. He said his New Year's greetings and left with the excuse that he couldn't hold his liquor. Seeing that, Feng Jin secretly informed Jiang Pingji and got up to follow him. Huaijia. Leaving the hot commander's tent, the cold wind and snow outside made Feng Jin shiver. "Second brother?" Feng Ju turned his head upon hearing the sound and called out respectfully. "Sigh." Feng Jin sighed and said in a low voice, "We haven't seen each other for a long time. Let's find a place to have a drink or two and get together." Although they were brothers, they hadn't even exchanged many letters since they parted ways in Shangjing, let alone celebrate the new year together. Feng Ju listened to his familiar tone and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Second brother, I thought you didn't like to drink?" He didn't usually touch alcohol, but now he was telling him to find a place to compete in drinking? Was his second brother possessed by a wandering ghost? Feng Jin pursed his lips and said helplessly, "I didn't like to drink in the past, but I have to train my tolerance." The Lord and a group of colleagues were all alcoholics and would drink at every banquet. Feng Jin couldn't possibly be unique and use tea as a substitute for alcohol, right? The two brothers found a place to drink. They set up a warming cauldron and arranged the sauce. The cold wind was blowing outside and the small hot pot was boiling. The meat slices and dry goods that were thrown in were quickly cooked. Although they were alone, Feng Jin and Feng Ju did not talk about work. They just gathered together to reminisce about their youth. "If you have time, remember to write a letter to father and mother," Feng Jin said. "When you left without saying a word, father almost fainted from anger." Feng Ju nodded. For a moment he was filled with warmth. It was as if the cauldron in front of him was warming his heart and body. Apart from the Feng brothers, Meng Heng was also sent by Jiang Pingji to visit Huang Song as a messenger. Huang Song asked him to stay for a simple meal, and Meng Heng went to Nie Sun's place. This time Meng Heng even brought his wife, who had a protruding abdomen. It's easy to add flowers to embroidery, but difficult to provide timely assistance. If it weren't for brother Sun and sister-in-law's help, my wife might not have been able to keep her pregnancy. Meng Heng did not talk about work. He only mentioned the help that Nie Sun and his wife had given them. Now that it was the new year, they naturally had to send generous gifts to Nie Sun and his wife. Otherwise, would they not be ingrates? This was a personal relationship. Nie Sun had no excuse to reject Meng Heng and his wife's goodwill. If there was a first, there would be a second. It was a good start, and it would be convenient for them to come and go in the future. After a simple meal, Meng Heng carefully helped his wife into the carriage and let the coachman drive the carriage away. Although Meng Heng was a gentleman also had a mind. He deliberately let the carriage drive slowly and passed by Yuan Xian's residence. He just happened to pass by Yuan Xian, who had just returned drunk. Yuan Xian's whole body was steaming. He burped and his eyes were drunk. "Yesin. Burp. This child. He's close to Lu Shi. Burp." Chapter 1041. Listening to the sound of the wheels turning, Meng Heng sighed softly. Everyone had their own masters and couldn't help themselves. After everything was settled, he had to seriously apologize to Nie Sun. Right now he could only harden his heart and bury Nie Sun. Meng Heng and his wife didn't deliberately avoid spies, so this matter quickly reached Huang Song's ears. Qingyun and Meng Heng hit it off very well. Huang Song chuckled. He turned to Madame Qi sitting next to him and said, "Considering the time, Madame Qingyun's baby isn't small anymore. When she's about to give birth, the war will probably be at its fiercest. The current situation is turbulent and war is on the verge of breaking out. Qingyun probably won't be able to stay by his wife's side and wait for Lin to be born. Furthermore, Qingyun doesn't have any elders at home, and it's his first time being a father, so he's definitely feeling uneasy. To make Qingyun feel at ease, please take care of Madame Qingyun." Madame Qi's lips curled up and she rolled her eyes at Huang Song. "Langjun, are you sure I won't anger Madame Nie into miscarriage if I go take care of her?" Huang Song was dumbfounded and berated her in a low voice. "You're staying up on New Year's Eve. What inauspicious words are you saying?" If Nie Sun heard this, he would think Huang Song and his wife were sinister. Madame Qi held her sleeping youngest son in her left hand and stroked her eldest son's soft hair with her right hand. She rolled her eyes at Huang Song. "I heard Madame Nie is very meticulous. You sent several beauties to Mr. Nie while she was pregnant. If I go, who knows what he'll think? What woman would like to see someone who liked to send concubines to their man?" Many of Huang Song's officials were married, and the wives of various families visited each other. Only Madame Nie Sun was cold. Why was she cold? Wasn't it because Huang Song had repeatedly sent beauties offered by others to Nie Sun's house and angered his legal wife? Huang Song was speechless. He sent beauties for Nie Sun's own good. His wife was pregnant and couldn't move, but a man's physical needs had to be taken care of. Huang Song was like most ancient men. His wife was his wife, and his concubines were just playthings used to vent his physical needs. He couldn't take concubines, but that didn't stop his officials from having 3 or 4 wives. Madame Qi saw through his thoughts and sneered coldly. Huang Song subconsciously shrank his neck. "The children are here, at least give me some face." Ever since the incident last time, Huang Song had become fond of this madam. Lady Qi was too lazy to pay attention to him and concentrated on coaxing her sleepy eldest son. "I'll help you take care of Madame Nie, but don't foolishly send beauties to other couples lest they hold a grudge against me." He heard that Madame Nie was Yuanjing's beloved daughter. Although she wasn't born into a family of generals, she had a temper. Why would she like to share a man with another woman? If you don't change, there's no harm in thinking about that one from the Huai family. Others learn from their mistakes, but you never learn from them. Madame Qi was a woman, and women understood women the best. Madame Nie rarely interacted with her and always used the excuse that she wasn't feeling well as an excuse to excuse herself. Wasn't it all because Huang Song's actions angered her? At the mention of Madame Fengjue, Huang Song pursed his lips tightly, his eyes filled with accusation. He and Fengju were not only emperor and minister, but also close friends who wore the same pants. The Feng family did not arrange for Fengju's marriage, but Huang Song, as half a brother, could not ignore it. He had wanted to choose a virtuous and gentle wife for her, but he did not expect his wife to be the one he had chosen. So, it was a long story. Fengju made a great contribution, so Huang Song was happy and sent him a pair of rare twin beauties. The aristocrats who fawned on him spent a lot of effort to buy these twin beauties and carefully train them. Worried that Fengju would be too shy to accept them, Huang Song specially ordered someone to send them to his residence. In the end, he even had someone warn Madame Fengjue. The legal wife must be magnanimous and not hold her husband back from taking concubines. The twin beauties were 16 or 16 years old. Their faces were full of collagen, and their appearance was full of life. Even if the male master did not use them, they would still be very pleasing to the eyes as decorations at home. Huang Song was just that considerate of his subordinates. And then, Fengju was chased out by his wife. Not only that, but Madame Fengjue also stripped the 2 girls naked and threw them into Huang Song's backyard. No matter how good Huang Song's temper was, there was a limit to it. He immediately flew into a rage and wanted to punish Madame Fengjue. If he did not discipline this woman for Fengjue, wouldn't she go to heaven in the future? Madame Fengjue's temper was the complete opposite of her looks. She was usually quiet, but once she got angry she could really climb the roof and flip the beams. Madame Fengjue was a tough nut to crack. She said to Huang Song calmly, "I heard that when the emperor is angry millions of corpses will be laid. When the feudal lords are angry blood will flow. I don't have such great abilities, but the hatred of stealing my husband is absolutely irreconcilable. Taking a head within 30 feet is also as easy as taking something from my pocket. Huang Song was speechless. The hatred of stealing her husband? Don't say that he and Fingjue had some shameful relationship, okay? He did not do anything. Didn't he just send Fingjue 2 beauties? How could this be considered the hatred of stealing her husband? Huang Song was angry and furious. What about taking a head within 30 feet? Wasn't that just a threat? What's the matter? I sent a beauty to help her take care of Huijia. Why is this woman so stubborn? Huang Song was angry, but Fingjue pleaded for mercy for his wife. Huang Song could not ignore Fingjue and really kill Fingjue's wife. In the end, he could only swallow the bitter pill back into his stomach. You can only blame Lanting. If she was a man, these little women in the backyard wouldn't be so arrogant. She's not even willing to let her husband take a concubine. What kind of logic is this? Which man out there doesn't have a sweetheart who can add fragrance to their sleeves? Madame Qi sneered, and Huang Song was instantly silenced. Jiang Pingji's appearance gave Madame Qi, who came from a family of generals, confidence. Madame Qi was also in charge of Huang Song, which indirectly gave the wives of Huang Song's counselors confidence. The lord was henpecked, and most of the officials would also be henpecked. This was the example of the superior following the subordinate's example. However, henpecked and chaste men were in the minority. Most men still liked to have a large number of wives and concubines. For men, money, power, and women were eternal pursuits. Therefore, Huang Song's habit of sending beauties did not get rid of it. If he could not send them to Fingjue to add color to his backyard, he could send them to others. Nie Sun was implicated just like that. It was just that, Huang Song thought of Nie Sun's inexplicable closeness to Meng Heng, and he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. He asked Madame Qi to take care of Nie Sun's wife. Caring for her subordinates was one thing, and the other was to alienate Nie Sun from Meng Heng. Madame Qi kept watch until midnight and fell into a deep sleep. Huang Song drank lightly under the moon and murmured, "Lanting has too many crafty ideas. I have to be on guard." Huang Song had seen Jiang Pingji's ability to create something out of nothing. He was afraid that Nie Sun would fall into her trap. At the end of the night, the sky was bright. The bonfire from last night had been extinguished. White smoke rose in spirals, giving off a sense of desolation. Chapter 1042. Jiang Pingji ran a few laps with her beloved White and her pretty boy. She was drenched in sweat and her cheeks were red. "Your Highness, quickly put it on." Wei Ci frowned and lifted his hand to put the cloak on Jiang Pingji, who had just returned. He was drenched in sweat and had to stay outside in the cold wind. Even if his body was made of iron, he couldn't stand it. Jiang Pingji obediently allowed Wei Ci to drape the cloak over her. "Has my lord eaten breakfast?" "No, I just took Big White and Little White to exercise, so my stomach is empty now." "Did you bring anything in your sleeves, Zixiao?" The clothes of the ancients did not have pockets. After all, those things were not elegant. Instead, they liked to make a fuss in the wide sleeves, which could hide a lot of things. Jiang Pingji's nose was sensitive. She immediately smelled the fragrance of meat in Wei Ci's sleeve. Wei Ci could not help but laugh. He took out a few meat buns wrapped in special oiled paper. "There is still a pot of meat porridge and chopped pickled vegetables in the tent. If my lord is still hungry, I will prepare more." Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. The meat buns puffed up her cheeks. Zixiao is becoming more and more virtuous. After saying this, she immediately asked, "Is there any news from the scouts?" Wei Ci could not be bothered with anything else the moment he asked about official business. "There are signs of the soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass being mobilized. I reckon that there will be movements in the near future." Wei Ci said, "The patience of the defending general is not bad. He has persisted for more than 20 days. If they continue to delay, our army will easily fall into a passive situation." No matter how popular Jiang Pingji was, it could not change the fact that she was a long-distance fighter. Otherwise, why would Jiang Pingji set up a field station in Chongzhou when she attacked the northern borderline? It was all for the sake of shortening the transportation line. The longer the supply line, the more food would be consumed. Not to mention the greater the risk, the military expenditure would also increase exponentially. The tens of thousands of mouths under Jiang Pingji had to eat. It was a terrifying number in one day, let alone 20 days. No matter who they are, they all have the mentality of a gambler. "The difference is in who is more serious," Jiang Pingji said. "The camp security has been lax for more than 20 days. At first, the defending general of Cold Chang Pass suspected that it was a ploy to lure the enemy, but as time went on, his heart began to waver. As long as he grasped this opportunity, he would be able to make a great contribution. Unfortunately, he was timid and stopped moving forward, missing one opportunity after another. As time goes by, even the most cautious person will have the mentality of fighting to the death and gamble fiercely. In the words of the livestream viewers, take a gamble and turn a bicycle into a motorcycle. Everything has to be tried. Who knows, you might win. Jiang Pingji's strategy was psychological warfare, luring the enemy to lead his troops out of seclusion. It was only at this time that the defenses of Cold Chang Pass were at their weakest, and the losses from breaching the pass could be minimized. It wasn't that Jiang Pingji didn't have the confidence to break through the pass head-on, but the casualties were too great. She didn't want the soldiers to sacrifice themselves for Hanchang Pass. It didn't matter if more food was consumed as long as fewer people died. After eating breakfast and drinking a pot of meat porridge, Jiang Pingji finally felt better. The new year had a new atmosphere, and the military camp still had remnants of the festive atmosphere from the new year. However, it was different over at Cold Chang Pass. Cold Chang Pass did not lack grain, but the garrison general was a stingy person. Why would he squander his wealth to feed the soldiers for the new year? Last night, on New Year's Eve, the soldiers guarding Cold Chang Pass could only stare at the orange bonfires in the distance. It was as if they could smell the mouth-watering smell of roasted meat and fine wine from afar. Others had a joyous new year, but they had to spend the whole night drinking northwest wind at the city walls. The enemy had challenged them for more than 20 days, but the general was still unwilling to fight. The morale of the soldiers at Cold Chang Pass was also affected. The garrison general of Cold Chang Pass hesitated for so many days, and he finally made up his mind to take a gamble. The generals under him complained incessantly. Not only did it affect the overall morale, but it also caused his reputation in the army to plummet. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Lu Shi and Jiang Pingji's camp was loose and undisciplined. If they seized the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, they would definitely reap great rewards. However, the garrison general insisted on doing things his own way, and he missed one good opportunity after another. The onlookers were furious. The garrison general was originally hesitant. Now that he was egged on by his subordinates, the balance in his heart slowly tilted. Take a gamble. Perhaps the bicycle would turn into a motorcycle. Gritting his teeth and steeling his heart, the garrison general of Cold Chang Pass made the decision to mobilize the troops. Once the order was issued, the originally low morale immediately rose. They wished they could grow wings and fight to the death with the enemy. Little did they know that their actions of mobilizing the troops were all seen by the cavalry scouts. Finally, I can't sit still anymore. Liyun had been stifled these days. He felt too tired when he was busy everywhere, but once he was free to eat and enjoy, he felt uncomfortable all over, as if he had nowhere to vent his energy. Now that he could finally fight, it felt great. Huang Song, who received the news, also could not sit still. As long as they successfully broke through Cold Chang Pass and crossed the treacherous river Song, they could directly enter the hinterland of Zhangzhou. Jiang Pingji reminded him, act according to the plan, remember not to leak any information. Huang Song knew the severity of the matter, and he nodded with a solemn face. The garrison general of Cold Chang Pass chose the first day of the new year, which was the night of the first day. As usual, the two camps lit up with raging bonfires. The security of the camp was lax, and the distribution of the tents was even more messy. Anyone with a bit of experience would know that such tents were a failure. Once there was a surprise attack, the messenger would not be able to immediately inform the entire camp, let alone organize an effective counterattack. The garrison general of Cold Chang Pass was still a little uneasy, but when he saw the messy camp with his own eyes, he sneered coldly in his heart. If he had known that Lu Shi only had this little ability, why would he be so jittery for so long? Sighing in his heart, the garrison general of Cold Chang Pass gathered his unnecessary thoughts and led the troops towards the enemy's camp. Lu Shi, that's all there is to him. I knew he didn't have the ability, the garrison general of Cold Chang Pass murmured in a low voice. His face was filled with obvious regret. Little did he know that no matter when he launched a sneak attack, the seemingly loose camp hid an ambush that he would not be able to return from. Although Jiang Pingji was confident, this confidence was built on a sufficiently strong foundation. For the past 20 days it seemed like the entire camp was having fun, but in fact most of the troops were hidden in the tents, ready for battle. In order to keep the troops in peak condition, she even arranged for them to work in 3 shifts and take turns to put on a show. For example, the camp looked relaxed on the surface, but most of the troops were hidden in the tents, lying in ambush, waiting for the heir to come to them. The garrison general of Cold Chang Pass led 5,000 troops to launch a sneak attack. Although it was said to be a sneak attack, they planned to leave after the battle. However, would the troops who had been in drought for so long let them retreat unscathed? Just as the garrison general of Cold Chang Pass was about to step into the trap, Jiang Pingji and the others led the troops to take a shortcut and went straight to the foot of Cold Chang Pass. Awu! Yawning sleepily, the troops on the top of the city wall rubbed their eyes with their hands. It was the middle of the night and they were very sleepy, yawning non-stop. What movement? Chapter 1043. What's going on? Don't scare yourselves in the middle of the night. Hearing this voice, the soldier's companion was startled. His sleepiness faded a little and he rushed over with more vigor. He yawned and squeezed out 2 drops of tears from the corner of his eyes to relieve his sore eyeballs. But I really heard it. The soldier opened his eyes wide and looked down at the city. It was dark all around except for the bonfire in the enemy's camp in the distance, which added a little color to the night. That's weird. Did I really hear it wrong? The soldier scratched his bun that hadn't been washed for a long time. His fingers pulled out a layer of sticky dandruff and he rubbed it on his clothes. Maybe I really heard it wrong. His companion rubbed his arms, trying to warm himself up a little. It's so cold in this damn weather. I really don't know when it will end. The soldiers at the bottom had no human rights. They did the most tiring work and received the lowest pay. Most of the time they didn't even have enough to eat or wear. If everyone was like this, such treatment wouldn't be very uncomfortable. It was good enough to survive in this chaotic world. However, Lu Shi and Huang Song's camp was very lively. They drank and barbecued at night. They were happier than immortals. Everyone was cannon fodder in this chaotic world. Why did others eat and drink well while he had to endure hunger? There was no harm without comparison. Every time he thought of this, his already hungry stomach became even hungrier. He was so hungry that it was difficult for him to even speak. Buddy, I'm going to take a nap. Call me if anything happens. I'm so hungry. Hey, what can happen at this time? Just take a nap. I'll call you when the sun rises. Lu Shi and Huang Song's camp only cared about eating, drinking, and playing. It was like this for more than 20 days. It was the middle of the night. There was not even a shadow, not to mention the wind blowing the grass. The tired soldiers leaned against the battlements and slept soundly, hoping that sleep could warm their bodies and save their energy. The soldiers at Hanchang Pass yawned continuously. Their consciousness became more and more blurry, and their eyelids became heavy as if they were filled with lead water. The cold wind blew, and the snowflakes falling from the sky were rolled up and deviated from their original trajectory. On this ordinary night, an arrow streaked across the night sky, emitting a buzzing sound as it left the bowstring. The sharp blade pierced into flesh and blood. The soldier who had just seen the Duke of Zhou suddenly opened his eyes wide. An unprecedented chill wrapped around him, as if his body had sunk into a 1,000-year cold pond. He tried to open his mouth, but no sound came out of his throat. It was as if the whole world had gone silent. In a breath's time, the remaining warmth in his body was cruelly stripped away by an invisible force. It hurts, it's so cold. A brief thought flashed through his mind, and the scene in front of him fell into endless darkness. In a trance, he seemed to hear his companion shouting at the top of his lungs, saying, "Enemy attack!" By the end of the first wave of arrows, more than half of the city guards had been killed, and the rest were either dead or injured. Get on the ladders. Archers, continue firing. Are the siege weapons ready? After clearing up a wave of enemy soldiers, he took advantage of the fact that there were fewer guards at the gates of Cold Chang Pass. At this moment he had to seize the time to build a scaling ladder and climb up the walls. Jiang Pingji led the vanguard troops, each of them wearing a white cloth. Under the cover of the snow and the night, they quickly made their way to Hanchang Pass. The general guarding Hanchang Pass had led his troops to launch a sneak attack on the main camp. It would be impolite not to reciprocate. Jiang Pingji naturally had to retaliate. What was a sneak attack? A sudden attack when the enemy was unprepared. Not only did it pay attention to the element of surprise, but it also paid attention to speed, launching a fierce attack when the enemy was unprepared. The terrain of Hanchang Pass was strategic. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. So what? No one could defend the pass she wanted to break through. Jiang Pingji's attack was sudden. In a face-to-face confrontation, a wave of soldiers on the city wall died, and the rest were wounded. Some people tried to fight back, some shouted, "Enemy attack," and some gritted their teeth. Their blood-stained fingers trembled as they pulled the bowstring and used the last of their strength to shoot a whistling arrow into the sky. As soon as the whistling arrow was shot, the entire Hanchang Pass seemed to have welcomed a tremor. The soldiers were in an uproar. They did not expect the enemy to launch a sneak attack at this time. However, the urgent matter was to send more troops to the city wall and guard the pass of Hanchang Pass. They must not let the enemy break through. Enemy attack, quick! In the middle of the night, many people had already entered a sweet dream. They had no choice but to sleep. They were cold and hungry. If they did not sleep, they might not be able to sleep due to hunger. When the movement outside was heard, many people reluctantly left their dreams. They threw down the thin blankets that were tightly wrapped around them and rushed out of the tent. The cold wind blew, blowing away the remaining warmth that lingered around them. Many people were so cold that they shivered. Their dazed minds instantly became clear. How could Jiang Pingji give them the chance to increase their troops? The archers lying in ambush in the snow were divided into 3 rows. After the first row finished shooting, the second row followed. When the third row finished shooting, the first row had already knocked their arrows and pulled their bows, aiming in the right direction. With this simple tactic, the archers could maintain a continuous rain of arrows falling on the city wall of Hanchang Pass. With the archers' cover, the scaling ladders were quickly pushed toward the city wall of Hanchang Pass. The vanguard troops began to attempt to rush the wall and attack. However, Hanchang Pass was called a dangerous pass because it naturally had its geographical advantages. The soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass were caught unprepared. The rapid attack almost made them unable to react. Of course, this was only temporary. When they reacted, they immediately used the terrain to counterattack. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes. Her dark eyes stared closely at the city wall of Hanchang Pass. The road ahead of Hanchang Pass was not smooth. The terrain was steep and narrow. It was not conducive for the use of siege weapons. If Jiang Pingji's siege ladders were not specially made, they would not be of much use. When the time came, they could only use the most primitive human flesh tactic and rely on huge casualties to force their way up the wall. However, they could still use the scaling ladders and use bows and arrows to open the way. Hanchang Pass was not as tricky as imagined. Jiang Pingji turned on the live stream during the battle. 850,000 night owls squatted in the live stream room to accompany her. As they fought, the audience realized that there was something wrong with the soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass. Fengqi Wutong, did you notice that the enemy's combat power is a little weak? Gui Shui Bupeng, I don't think they are weak. It's obvious that our streamer is too strong. Piaoliu Feishu, they are indeed a little weak. If this situation continues, the streamer will definitely break through the pass in at most an hour. I zoomed in and found that the soldiers guarding the pass were a little old. They did not look very energetic. It was as if there were no strong young men in the entire army. The careless audience only watched the killing on the battlefield. They watched in the middle of the night with their blood boiling and excitement. However, the attentive audience realized that the enemy's combat power was different from what they had imagined. They occupied a dangerous pass, but they were still brutally beaten by Jiang Pingji. They were puzzled, but Jiang Pingji was well aware of it. It was not that the combat power of the soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass was not high. It was clear that in order to succeed in the sneak attack, the general guarding the pass selected all the elites. According to the general's understanding of Hanchang Pass, even if the remaining soldiers were not as strong as the elites, they could still defend the pass by relying on the steep terrain. Because they were in a hurry, the army's formation became more and more disorganized. Less than a quarter of an hour's journey from Kolchang Pass, the defending general of Kolchang Pass could already see the smoke rising from the city walls, and he grew increasingly anxious. That was when the unforeseen event happened. In the darkness of the night, arrows tore through the air, bringing with them a strong gust of wind as they flew towards the army, killing and injuring countless soldiers. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The commander of Evercold Pass charged at the very front. He was also the first to discover the ambush. Although he didn't die, his shoulder was shot by a stray arrow. The sharp arrowhead was embedded in his bone joint, and the pain made his eyeballs almost pop out of their sockets. Get into formation and face the enemy. He had never expected that the enemy would not set up an ambush in the empty camp, but instead set up an ambush on the road. If they set up an ambush in an empty camp, the general in charge of guarding Kolchang Pass would still be on tenterhooks. The army's formation would not be scattered, so a sneak attack would not be very effective. What about now? They were eager to return and the army only cared about rushing back, so they didn't notice that the army's formation was in disarray. Meng Hun led his troops and set up an ambush along the way, intercepting and killing the returning reinforcements of Cold Chang Pass. The two armies formed an alliance, and Meng Hun also had Huang Song's troops on his side. However, they did not hand over command and instead fought on their own. Huang Song's family had many generals, and although this old general Yuan Xn was old, he fought bravely and fiercely. Other than him, the other generals of the Yuan clan also performed well, killing the enemy bravely. Meng Hun did not rush for quick success, and instead commanded the army to surround and kill the enemy. Meng Hun and Fu Wang's commanding styles were different. Fu Wang was a fierce wild wolf. Whether it was attacking or defending, he exuded a frightening ruthlessness. Meng Hun was different. He didn't care about merits and achievements, and pursued the greatest rewards with the least sacrifices. In other words, Fu Wang was a sharp blade and Meng Hun was a thick shield. Yuan Xian's eyes were red from killing, and his body was covered in the enemy's blood. He couldn't even remember how many heads he had chopped off. Pa, yeah. Yuan Xn spat and yelled, using brute force to block the enemy's attacks, forcing them to retreat. He killed his way and the ground on both sides was littered with corpses. Only when most of the enemies were killed did Yuan Xian resentfully stop. He hadn't killed enough, his eyes were red, and he reluctantly put away the weapon that had harvested countless heads. He glanced at Meng Hun from the corner of his eye, and he secretly spat on the ground, his eyes full of disdain. Why? Meng Hun had only killed a few people so far, and they were the heads that Meng Hun picked up after the enemy was defeated. His armor was clean. Did he look like a general who charged into the battlefield? Tiske, you're not good at fighting but you're good at commanding people with a glib tongue, Yuan Xn muttered and glanced at Meng Hun disdainfully. Meng Hun joined Jiang Pingji's camp, and he spent most of his time training the troops. Almost every batch of recruits had been tortured by him, so Meng Hun had a high prestige in Jiang Pingji's camp. However, because he didn't have any outstanding achievements, Meng Hun's reputation wasn't that great. Now that he was on the battlefield, he hadn't killed many people, his weapons were not stained with much blood, and his armor was clean. How was that appropriate? For a general, the enemy's heads and the scars on his body were the real merits. Yuan Xn didn't hide his dissatisfaction, and Nye Sun, who was ordered to supervise the troops, saw it. Captain Yuan, now that the two armies are cooperating, you can't? Before Nye Sun could finish, Yuan Xn looked straight ahead, bumped Nye Sun's shoulder and walked away, refusing to listen to him. The two passed each other and Yuan Xn said in a hoarse voice, "Humph, this is my business." "Why do you care about this old man's business? Who is Lu Shi? Does he need you to flatter him like this?" In Yuan Xian's eyes, Meng Hun's performance was mediocre. It was a disgrace for Yuan Xian to let such a person hold the military power. Nye Sun didn't stand on the same side as him, but he even helped Meng Hun. It was unreasonable. Thinking of this, Yuan Xn thought of Nye Sun and Meng Heng, who was under Jiang Pingji's camp. Yuan Xian's eyes darkened and he snorted. He didn't trust Nye Sun, and now he was even more suspicious. Nye Sun was wearing a scholar's robe, and Yuan Xn was wearing heavy armor. The latter's bump hurt Nye Sun's left shoulder, and it was probably going to bruise. Yuan Xian left without looking back. He didn't even leave an apology. His attitude was terrible. Nye Sun's pretty face turned ugly for a moment. Yuan Xian used his seniority to flaunt his seniority in front of his lord, but he didn't even look at the situation of the battle. He was so stupid. For the sake of the big picture, he swallowed his anger and temporarily put this episode to the back of his mind. Meng Hun looked up at the sky and calculated the time in his heart. He led the troops to Hanchang Pass according to plan. Although the defending general of Hanchang Pass had taken away the elites, there were still about 20,000 soldiers left to guard the pass. Chapter 1045. It turned out that Meng Hun had underestimated his lord. There were only wrong names, but there were no wrong nicknames. What is Jiang Pingji's nickname? The 850,000 viewers in the livestream channel unanimously agreed, the humanoid battlefield was a killing machine. Give her an invincible machete, and she could destroy a battle fortress by herself. She was so strong that she didn't seem like a human. The terrain of Cold Chang Pass was steep, easy to defend and hard to attack. The soldiers didn't have many points to focus on, so it was difficult for them to charge or retreat. The enemy occupied the advantage of the checkpoint and gradually recovered from their disadvantage. The battlefield seemed dangerous, but Cold Chang Pass was still impregnable and unshakable. "My lord, we can't go on like this. Although the troops used ladders to climb up the city walls, the walls are narrow and it is not easy to get into formation." The walls of Cold Chang Pass were narrow and there were too few places for the soldiers to stand. The number of soldiers that could scale the walls at the same time was not large. The enemy was different. They climbed the wall from behind the pass and the terrain was more open. They could completely rely on their advantage in numbers to repel the people who climbed the wall. Looking at the corpses of their people falling from the city walls, not only did Feng Zhen's expression turn ugly, but Jiang Pingji's expression also turned gloomy. If it was an ordinary city, once the city walls were lost, the outcome of the battle would have been decided. However, there was naturally a reason why Changhan Pass was known as one of Tsang Prefecture's 3 natural barriers. If it were so easy to break through, the Meng family that occupied Sangzhou wouldn't have been able to stand firm for hundreds of years. Jiang Pingji decisively ordered, "Zisher, order the soldiers on the city wall to retreat. If they continued to waste time like this, their losses would only increase. It would be a meaningless sacrifice and it was not worth it." Feng Zhen's expression changed drastically, and a look of struggle flashed across his eyes. But after a moment, his eyes turned resolute. "This subject obeys." "No." Qing Jing stopped Feng Zhen. He gritted his teeth and said, "If we retreat now, our morale will plummet and we won't be able to break through. As you can see, even though we've occupied the city walls, we still haven't shaken the enemy's defensive line. Why would I send my soldiers to their deaths by climbing the wall?" Jiang Pingji said coldly to Qing Jing, "I'm going to take down Hanchang Pass today." Qing Jing said coldly. Jiang Pingji was very decisive. Once she made up her mind, there was no turning back. She was indecisive. "I am the commander of the vanguard." Jiang Pingji's attitude was firm. She did not allow others to resist. The battlefield was ever-changing. If the order was delayed, even if it was only for a minute or a second, there would still be innocent soldiers paying with their lives. Jiang Pingji revealed her identity. Qing Jing could only cup his hands and bow. With a heavy heart he chose to obey. Even though Jiang Pingji was not Qing Jing's lord as he had said, Jiang Pingji was the commander of the vanguard troops. On the battlefield, the commander-in-chief's orders were above everything else. Jiang Pingji ordered for the attack to be abandoned. The soldiers who had already climbed the wall could only retreat as they fought, giving up the victory that they had obtained with great difficulty. After years of training, the troops under Jiang Pingji's tent could be absolutely obedient, so it did not affect their morale much. In comparison, the performance of the soldiers sent by Huang Song was slightly inferior. Their originally high-spirited morale was greatly reduced, and their retreat was not as decisive. Jiang Pingji's side chose to retreat. The enemy troops guarding Hanchang Pass were so happy that their eyes were brimming with tears. Their loud cheers boosted their morale. Jiang Pingji gritted her teeth and asked Feng Zhen as she listened to the tsunami of voices on the city walls, "Is the catapult ready?" Feng Zhen cupped his hands and answered, "It's ready." The catapult was huge, its target was obvious, and it was difficult to move. It was rarely used except during sieges or when 2 armies confronted each other head-on. However, as a technological expert, how could Jiang Pingji not think of a way to solve this problem? The catapult that had first appeared in the Battle of Qingan District had been improved several times. It could basically adapt to battles on various terrains. Most importantly, the catapult could be dismantled and moved. It was not complicated to build. Even though the terrain of Hanchang Pass was narrow and precipitous, as long as it was a relatively flat area, the catapult could be built and put to use. Since they could not climb the wall and seize the pass, they might as well dismantle the pass. When Jiang Pingji sent people to attack the city, she had instructed the rear to build catapults. Now they were in position. "When we get the explosives, we'll blow up wherever we hit. Whatever natural defenses, we'll raise them all to the ground." Jiang Pingji secretly gritted her teeth. If not for the chaos on the battlefield, she really wanted to take her axes and tear down the 2 heavy bronze gates of Hanchang Pass. Qing Jing also noticed the situation behind him. His expression suddenly darkened. The terrain of Hanchang Pass was steep. Heavy objects like the catapult could not be transported up at all. Thinking about this, he suddenly remembered the supply wagons behind the vanguard battalion. Could it be that the things in the supply wagons were not other than the parts of the catapult? Could it be that Lu Shi had the help of an elite disciple of the school of Mo to create such a marvelous design and manufacture? Qing Jing guessed half of it correctly. Jiang Pingji did have disciples of Moism, but Zhang Ping was more proficient in civilian equipment. Xiao Guang focused on water conservancy. Most of the time, Jiang Pingji provided the ideas for the improvement of the siege weapons. Zhang Ping led the craftsmen to try to improve them one by one. "Give me the rocket." Jiang Pingji ordered someone to bring her heavy bow. The bow was extremely heavy. From the bow to the bowstring, it was all made by the craftsmen using special materials. According to their calculations, to fully draw the bow, the person had to be at least 8 feet tall and have the strength of 4 stones. Jiang Pingji's arm length was not enough, but her height was enough. As for the strength of 4 stones needed to draw the bow, naturally it was enough. With one foot on the ground and the other on the body of the bow, she pulled the bowstring with her right hand and lit the specially made arrow. Her whole body gathered strength. Under the guidance of the great force, the heavy bow was drawn into a full moon. A heavy buzzing sound rang out. The huge arrow suddenly left the bowstring and flew toward the city walls of Hanchang Pass. The arrowhead made of refined iron sank into the gate of the city walls. Cracks in the shape of a spider web spread in all directions. The beam of the gate was actually perturbed. "Charge at that place. Smash it." Jiang Pingji's night vision was very strong. She could clearly see the situation on the city walls of Hanchang Pass, but the others could not. They could not do it, let alone the catapult gunners at the rear of the army. Qing Jing watched the whole process. His hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, were clenched tightly. His neatly trimmed, round nails left crescent marks on his palms. Jiang Pingji threw the huge bow to the orderly beside her. Her body was still surrounded by a vicious aura that had yet to dissipate. The guards on the city walls did not have time to rejoice. Huge rocks fell from the sky one after another, smashing into the city gates, the battlements, and the mountains on both sides of Hanchang Pass. The smiles on the faces of the guards at Hanchang Pass had yet to disappear. The huge rocks that fell from the sky caught them off guard. This was completely different from the script they had expected. Chapter 1046. The ferocious firepower caught the defenders of Cold Chang Pass off guard, and the advantage that they had regained with great difficulty was gone. In this era of outdated war equipment, catapults posed too much of a threat to checkpoints. Qing Jing couldn't see the situation on the city wall clearly, but judging from the sounds, the battlefield had already deviated from them. Qing Jing bowed deeply to Jiang Pingji as he recalled the earlier dispute. He thought that Jiang Pingji was being willful and rash, but looking at the current situation, it was clear that she had a card up her sleeve. Not only did he make prompt decisions and cut his losses in time, but he also made the most correct arrangements. At the same time, Qing Jing could not help but feel fear and coldness in his heart. Jiang Pingji nodded at Qing Jing, then said to the orderly, "Take my weapon or I'll tear down Hanchang Pass today." With Hanchang Pass demolished, the Meng family of Cangzhou would lose a natural stronghold. After crossing the treacherous River Pine, Cangzhou would be stripped of its defenses and become a soft beauty. She could do whatever she wanted. She had killed the northern borderline, why would she be afraid of the Meng family of Cangzhou? "Back then I said that I would cut off the head of the Meng family with my own hands. Take this Frost Chang Pass as interest." Jiang Pingji murmured. Hanchang Pass, which was originally impregnable, was now full of potholes from the stone catapults. It looked exceptionally miserable. Stop the catapults, get on the scaling ladders and siege towers. Since they couldn't climb the walls and take over the city, they would tear down the city gates and advance from both sides. With the previous experience of climbing the wall and the formation of the defenders of Cold Chang Pass being smashed by the catapults, their second attempt at climbing the wall was rather smooth. The assembled siege wood was also in place. There were 20 soldiers on each side, carrying the siege wood as they charged towards the city gate. By the time Meng Hun arrived with his army, the main gate of Cold Chang Pass had already been torn down, and the two armies were engaged in a fierce battle inside the city walls. Meng Hun faintly had the urge to feel his scalp go numb. His lord was too capable. The strategists and generals under her were very pressured. Although they had yet to take down Cold Chang Pass, they had already broken through the city gates and taken over the city walls. There was almost no suspense in this battle. "Your Highness, I'm late." Jiang Pingji said, "Not late, not late. You came just in time. Lead the troops and defeat those bastards. Go back and eat your breakfast." Meng Hun, after being stunned for a while, Meng Hun answered firmly. His Highness had already given the order to take down Cold Chang Pass before dawn. "My lord, do you want?" Meng Hun looked at the two huge wolf teeth hammers in Jiang Pingji's hands. Just looking at them was enough to make him panic. Jiang Pingji said, When the army takes over the city in trance, she really wanted to have a fight, but the two armies were locked in a fierce battle at the entrance of the city. Jiang Pingji couldn't possibly squeeze her way in, could she? When the army charged into Cold Chang Pass and the battlefield opened up, she would stretch her muscles and bones. Meng Hun heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that his lord wouldn't treat him as his lord and would personally fight with his life on the line. Blades and swords had no eyes on the battlefield. If the lord dared to do this, the few masters would fight her to the death. Although Cold Chang Pass was a natural stronghold in Sangzhou, with Meng Hun's reinforcements, the enemy gradually lost the battle line. When Jiang Pingji saw the situation, she howled and rushed into the enemy troops with two ferocious specially made wolf teeth hammers in her hands. One hammer could kill a person, two hammers could even overturn a house. The experienced viewers in the streaming room used the bullet screen to protect themselves. The dense bullet screen covered the bloody scene. Kixingsu, the streamer is getting more and more ferocious. One hammer hit from the top of a person's head to the ground cracked. Instead of sleeping in the middle of the night, you accompany the streamer in battle. You repay me with such a horrible and bloody scene? It scared me so much that the top of my skull flew off. Xiaohe Buyao Jiao Jiao. I'm used to watching all kinds of horror movies and I've been through hundreds of battles. I was so scared just now that my crispy potato chips dropped. Qingbei Xiu'er, seeing this situation, I have a bold idea. If the streamer uses these two wolf teeth hammers to pound the noodles she makes should be very chewy, right? The meat that is hammered will definitely be finer than the meat that is cut by a machine. Hao Chui Xiang Yang, to the previous poster your answer is 100. When can I be as excellent as you? I've already washed my hands. Can I touch your trophy now? I can't. The thought of the streamer using the hammer to pound human flesh makes my stomach violently uncomfortable. The dense bullet screen couldn't stop Jiang Pingji's performance. Every life that was taken away by her with the hammer was basically indistinguishable from its original species. All that was left was a mass of blood mixed with pieces of internal organs and bone residue. Jiang Pingji personally demonstrated the beauty of violence. After killing enough, Jiang Pingji's depressed mood for the whole night was much better. Unknowingly, she had already killed her way to the residence of the general of Hanchang Pass. It was as if she had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. She was red from head to toe. According to the military order, they couldn't hurt ordinary people or the families of innocent enemy soldiers. They could only arrest them and wait for a unified punishment. Jiang Pingji entered the general's residence. The building of the residence was luxurious and there were countless servants. It was obvious that the owner was a person who enjoyed extravagant life. Not only that, but the servant girls who looked panicked and could not escape in time were mostly delicate and charming with a slim figure. Tie them up. If they do anything else that violates the military order, kill them without mercy. Jiang Pingji governed the army strictly. The soldiers didn't dare to go against the law. However, besides her soldiers there were also Huang Songs. It was inevitable that they would do something outrageous. Her worry was not without reason. When Jiang Pingji barged into the inner courtyard, she saw a few soldiers forcing two servant girls with hideous smiles. This kind of situation was very common. Huang Song had always forbidden it, but it couldn't stop the chaos of war. There would always be villains who took advantage of the chaos to commit crimes. Even if they were discovered, the low-quality soldiers would drag their companions into the mire and shield each other. However, Jiang Pingji was someone who couldn't bear to have sand in her eyes. She didn't even blink. With a few hammers she took them away. Qing Jing and Feng Zhen followed her. There were also a few personal guards surrounding her to prevent Jiang Pingji from being hurt by the chaotic troops. It turned out that Jiang Pingji was lucky enough not to hurt anyone. Looking at the corpses that had been smashed into minced meat, Qing Jing's eyelids twitched. Jiang Pingji rested the handle of the Wolf Fang hammer on her shoulder with one hand and said to Qing Jing with a smile, "They're just a few scum who violated military discipline. Bogeo won't hold it against me. If he sees the behavior of these scum, he'll most likely have them punished according to military law." Qing Jing looked expressionless, but in fact, his heart was in turmoil. Jiang Pingji tilted her head and glanced at the tightly shut door of the inner courtyard. Behind the door came the sound of women sobbing. There was more than one person. She lifted her foot and kicked the door open. Indeed, there were more than 10 women and young children hiding in the courtyard. "Take them away." The soldiers went forward and grabbed the women. They were crying non-stop as if they were mourning for their future. Only one person was an exception. Wait. A woman dressed in plain clothes with her hair tied up in a woman's bun walked through the crowd. She walked forward with her head held high and chest puffed out. You are? Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes. The woman's face was somewhat familiar. Chapter 1047. Jiang Pengji looked at the woman calmly without a word, as if she was thinking about something. When Feng Zhen, who was standing to the side, saw the woman's appearance, his originally dull eyes brightened in an instant. Admiration flashed in his eyes. Don't be fooled by Feng Zhen's wanton love of freedom. In some ways this prodigal Feng was a devoted person. How many beauties were there in the world? Those who outshone the moon and put flowers to shame, and those who were thin and fat were too numerous to count. Among the 3,000 beauties, Feng Zhen only loved the older sister. If she wasn't a mature older sister, no matter how beautiful she was, she would be bland and uninteresting in his eyes. The plain-clothed woman in front of him happened to be Feng Zhen's favorite type. Her face was like a goose egg and her skin was creamy. She had a pair of phoenix eyes, long and narrow, curved inward and outward. Her black eyebrows were like willow leaves in February. She had bright eyes and a slender figure. Her waist was like a willow. Even though she wore plain-colored clothes, it couldn't hide her maturity. According to Feng Zhen's standards, he would give this woman a high score of over 90. Although beauty was good, one didn't have to take it for oneself. Feng Zhen's attitude was still one of appreciation. Seeing that his lord didn't speak, Feng Zhen smiled and said, "Is what you said true?" The woman secretly clenched her fists in her sleeves, but her face was calm as she answered. "Everything I said is true. How would I dare to gamble with my own life?" The woman smiled faintly as if her previous anxiety and worry were just an illusion. Hanchang Pass had been breached by the enemy. Cries of killing could be heard everywhere. The servants and maids were all busy escaping. How could they care about this family? The woman was born in Hejian County and married to Zhangzhou at the age of 20. Although she was a woman from an aristocratic family, she knew what would happen to the family of the enemy after the city was breached. Before Jiang Pingji arrived, the soldiers robbed and killed the servants who fled. They even had evil thoughts about the maids in the manor. When the other concubines were at a loss, the woman decisively gathered the women and children to hide in the inner courtyard. They used the walls to resist for a while. While hiding in the inner courtyard, she heard the sound of several maids being captured by the enemy. Their pitiful cries even drowned out the cries of killing outside. Therefore, when the door of the inner court was kicked open, the woman mistakenly thought that Jiang Pingji and the others had ill intentions. If he didn't do anything, the fate of all the women in the courtyard would be worrying, and even the children would find it hard to keep their lives. In desperation, the woman simply mentioned Jiang Pingji, hoping that there would be a chance of survival. She really knew Jiang Pingji. They had some contact when they were young. It was not a lie to say that she was an old friend. Feng Zhen glanced at the woman, then turned to look at his lord. She was staring at him with her black and white eyes. "This is interesting. My master is right in front of you. If you really are an old friend of my master, why didn't you recognize him?" He looked at the woman with a faint smile. She quickly understood Feng Zhen's meaning, and her already pale face instantly lost all color. Lu Shi. The woman turned her gaze and looked at Jiang Pingji, who was in the middle. Her words were filled with disbelief. She really didn't expect Jiang Pingji to be in front of her. Feng Zhen was just about to smile when his lord nodded at the woman. "Yeah, long time no see." Feng Zhen. No, the woman in front of him was really an old friend of his lord? Feng Zhen was dumbfounded. The audience was also dumbfounded. They didn't have Jiang Pingji's abnormal memory. After the commotion, the ancient big boss who had been lurking for a long time jumped out. "Tudu Feiqiu, this lady looks a little familiar. I remember she was one of the noble ladies who appeared when the host first started streaming. She was Shangguan Wan's best friend." He had been frantically searching through the streaming notes and finally found her. "Wan Xiu, Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu. Damn, big boss, you're still alive. Qilin, I worship you, big boss. Shou Shirtu, I worship you, big boss. 20 Sui Jiu, go, pokeball, capture a big boss alive." Those who were familiar with the streaming knew that the first viewer in the streaming room was Tudu Feiqiu. The first recorded video was also from him. It was said that he was also the founder of the Empress's streaming forum and the editor of a related magazine. It was rumored that a tycoon had spent millions just to buy his ancient ID. Unfortunately, he refused to sell it. The woman was Wan Xiu. She had met Jiang Pingji several times in the past. She heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Jiang Pingji's response. She didn't know which mountain of corpses and sea of blood Jiang Pingji had crawled out from. She was covered in blood and it was a frightening sight. How could she recognize such a horrifying appearance? The last time they met was 8 years ago. Jiang Pingji was taller than ordinary women. Many men had to look up to her. She wore armor and a helmet. She held a pair of hammers in her hands. She stood there simply. She was a young general full of heroic spirit. Who would associate her with a maid? Your husband's family? Jiang Pingji looked at her attire and frowned. If Wan Xiuer's husband was an enemy general at Hanchang Pass, his corpse would have been cold by now. Although Jiang Pingji would not show mercy, it was somewhat embarrassing to kill an old friend's husband and make her a widow. Wan Xiuer sighed softly and looked calm. My husband's family is the general guarding Hanchang Pass. I guess he has already reported to the King of Hell. The calmer the other party was, the more embarrassed Jiang Pingji was. Wan Xiuer's reaction to the death of her husband was calm, but her husband's concubines and children were crying loudly. They didn't even care about their image. Hearing the commotion, Wan Xiuer looked down indifferently and sneered. Jiang Pingji was also thick-skinned. She did not hold back her embarrassment for long. She said calmly, considering our friendship, I will return your husband's body to you after the war ends. At least he can be buried in peace and his corpse won't be exposed in the wilderness. Wan Xiuer said, I am your prisoner. If my deceased husband's body can be left intact, it will be considered a good ending. Her reaction angered the crying concubines, who scolded her one by one. You old shrew who can't lay eggs. The master has always been good to you. Now that he's gone, you're not even willing to shed a tear. Could it be that you're cursing the master to die early so that you can climb to a higher branch? What a vicious heart you have. Evil woman, you will get your retribution sooner or later. A few beautiful concubines were weeping and sobbing, and a few young children were sobbing in their arms. Wan Xiuer didn't even bother to raise her eyebrows. Seeing the situation, Jiang Pingji ordered people to take the noisy women and children away. Her action was not rough, but it was not gentle either. Look at you, you haven't been very comfortable all these years. Wan Xiuer tucked her scattered hair behind her ears and looked calm. Chapter 1048. Jiang Pingji looked at her, the memories in her mind becoming clearer and clearer. In her memory, Wan Xiuer was gentle and intelligent. She was the standard aristocratic daughter of Hejian's aristocratic family, charming and gentle. Now that they met again, she seemed to have changed into a different person. Her eyes seemed to have seen through the world. Her husband had died, but she reacted as if a familiar stranger had died. She was frighteningly calm. Although she was a prisoner because she was Jiang Pingji's old friend, Wan Xiuer did not suffer. Thank you. Wan Xiuer bowed and followed the soldiers of the female battalion to the camp where the female prisoners were kept. Why are you stretching your neck? Jiang Pingji glanced at Feng Zhen impatiently. The other party's weakness was caught, but he said calmly, everyone loves beauty. My lord, please let me look at such a beauty that suits your taste. Seeing too many broken walls, mountains of corpses, and seas of blood will inevitably affect your mood. Do you think this makes sense, my lord? Nonsense. Jiang Pingji snorted and sent people to clean up the battlefield. Feng Zhen hurriedly followed. Qing Jing, who was watching from the side, sighed and followed closely. They had won the battle. The whole army was beaming with joy and their morale was high. The generals wanted to take advantage of this momentum and cross the Song River in one go. If they delayed for a while, when the enemy's reinforcements arrived, the two armies would have to face each other across the Song River. It would be a waste of time and energy. However, the strategists had the opposite opinion. The Song River was vast, rapid, and precipitous. It was still winter, so there was no ice on the surface. If they were not familiar with the water, wouldn't they give the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of them? Moreover, the two armies had just gone through a big battle. They needed time to adjust their condition. If they ignored everything and forced their way across the Song River, even if they reached the other side, they would be exhausted and powerless. What was the difference between encountering the enemy and courting death? Marching on water was different from marching on the road. Those who were not good at swimming would get seasick and their condition would deteriorate. They might even fall sick because they were not acclimatized. The Song River was not the Yi River. It was turbulent and not as smooth as the Yi River. If they were not good at swimming, wouldn't they die? In addition, the strategists had their own considerations. There is a saying in the art of war: when a guest arrives at the end of the river, do not welcome him in the water. This was the so-called attacking halfway through, a very useful tactic. Generally speaking, when two armies face each other across the river, when the enemy is halfway across the river, part of the enemy has already reached the shore, while the other part is still crossing the river. At this time, the front and the tail are not connected, and the formation is in chaos. If we go and annihilate the enemy, it will be advantageous to our side. If Jiang Pingji and the rest crossed the river without any preparation, the enemy would easily seize the opportunity. At that time, he would not be able to take care of both the front and the back, and he would not be familiar with water battles. He would definitely die. For example, in the previous battle against the northern borderline, if the northern borderline did not panic first and instead took the opportunity to launch an attack while Jiang Pingji was halfway through, the outcome of the battle would have been completely different. Unfortunately, the northern borderline was one step behind. They revealed a flaw first and were defeated by Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji and Huang Song considered the opinions of the strategists. They simply set up camp near the Song River. The army rested for a few days before making any further plans. In this great victory, Huang Song rejected the suggestion of splitting the loot 50-50. He took the initiative to take 40% of the spoils of war, while Jiang Pingji took 60%. The generals under Huang Song's command were very unhappy with this decision, but they had to admit that Jiang Pingji's side had contributed the most in this breakthrough. She had contributed the most, so naturally she had the right to take the biggest share. Jiang Pingji let Wei Xi and Feng Jin deal with the captives, the military supplies, and the distribution of the remaining assets. Wei Xi and Feng Jin had just left when Feng Zhen called out to them from behind. He stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Feng Zhen, inquiring with his eyes. They were busy now, so they did not have time to play with Feng Zhen. I heard that the Lord entrusted the two of you with an important task. Zhen, I have a presumptuous request. It was rare for Feng Zhen to be so serious. He spoke in a genteel manner, even using the term Zhen. What is it? Feng Jin asked aloud. Because of his personality, Feng Jin did not like Feng Zhen very much. Unfortunately, his lord was also an unrestrained and wonderful person, so Feng Jin could only try to get along with people like Feng Zhen. After working together for a long time, he slowly felt that Feng Zhen's bad habits were not unbearable. Feng Zhen looked at Feng Jin, then at Wei Xi, his expression hesitant. He wanted to pull one of them over to have a private conversation, but doing so would definitely offend the other person. In that case, he might as well go all out. In this battle, there was someone among the female captives. You know. Feng Zhen smiled and raised his eyebrows. The expressions of the two people in front of him darkened. They didn't know. Seeing this, Feng Zhen hurriedly used Jiang Pingji as a shield and said righteously, "Don't misunderstand. That woman is an old friend of the Lord." But the Lord was too busy and seemed to have forgotten about this. She was really worried that the female captives would be taken away by Huang Song and his group. Feng Jin and Wei Xi were speechless. As if they would believe you. In the end, it was Wei Xi who gave them face. Who is that woman? No matter how frivolous Feng Zhen was, he was still a good friend. She and the Lord are both from Hejin County. She seems to be the widow of the defending general of Hanchang Pass. After asking around, her name is Wan Xiu. Wan Xiu? Wei Xi's eyes widened slightly and he stared at Feng Zhen for a long time. Wei Xi was no stranger to the name Wan Xiu. The Jiang dynasty was open-minded. After a woman married, she would continue to use her maiden name instead of the simple Wan Shi of Feng. Wei Xi could remember the name Wan Xiu, for two reasons. First, this person made Feng Zhen change his mind. Second, she was Changxing's confidant, Feng Yu's birth mother. If he remembered correctly, before Wan Xiu remarried to Feng Zhen, she was indeed the wife of a general under the Mengs. However, the situation in his past life and this life were different. In his past life, the Mengs were annexed by Huang Song. Wan Xiu's husband took advantage of the situation and defected to Huang Song. At that time, Feng Zhen was also working under Huang Song. After Huang Song was hounded to death by the Lord, Feng Zhen became loyal and even asked the Lord for the widowed Wan Xiu. Now, fate was too wonderful for words. Wei Xi said, "Okay, I'll remember this." In fact, there was no need for Feng Zhen to come over to remind her. Jiang Pingji had not forgotten about this. After she finished her business, she got up and went to the women's camp to see Wan Xiu. In any case, she was an old friend. She even killed her husband. It was only right to give her some preferential treatment. "Do you want to keep your husband's family?" Jiang Pingji asked her. "If they are, it's not a problem to give them some food to eat." 3 concubines, 6 concubines for maids who had slept with him, and 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. With such a large lineup, one could imagine the days Wuxia had spent in their backyard. Wuxia said, "Everyone has their own fate. Let's leave it to fate." Leave it to fate? Did that mean she didn't care? Jiang Pingji was surprised. Don't you want to leave a bloodline for your short-lived husband? A hint of coldness flashed in Wuxia's eyes. The nails on her right hand almost dug into the flesh of her palm. Chapter 1049. Previously, a concubine insulted Wuxia as an old shrew who couldn't lay eggs. Was that true? No. Wuxia's physique was slightly cold, so her chances of conceiving were lower than that of an ordinary woman. However, after taking good care of herself, she was no different from an ordinary woman. After 2 years of marriage, the child she longed for arrived. However, there was a serious internal strife in the backyard, and her husband was even more unscrupulous. He would bring all sorts of fragrant and smelly things into their backyard. Did he really think that their backyard was a garbage dump? For the sake of their children, Wuxia tolerated them for a while, but those women kept their eyes on her position as the legal wife and repeatedly attacked her. Guard day and night. It is difficult to guard against a thief in one's own house. She could fend off other women's plots, but she never thought that she would fall into the hands of the person who slept next to her. It was rare for her husband to show such tenderness, but the food he gave her had been added with something poisonous that could cause a woman to have an abortion. She had been in pain for a day and a night. Her 2-month-old child flowed out of her body like water. Wuxia investigated and found out that her stupid husband actually listened to the concubine's words. He believed that the concubine really wanted to bury the hatchet with her. Not only that, her husband even made the food that the noble concubine had personally made into something that he had specially made for her and tricked her into eating it. After Wuxia was able to get out of bed, she led her men and rushed to the concubine's courtyard, intending to kill her and throw her out of the inner courtyard. Why was it that she had lost her child, but the other party wasn't hurt at all? Unfortunately, she had someone to rely on. The other party said arrogantly, "If you didn't block the way, the one who married cousin would be me. What right do you have to act like the legal wife in front of me?" "Yes, I did trick my cousin into feeding you the medicine, but so what? Your cousin and mother-in-law won't acknowledge the child in your womb." Wuxia was once trapped in a bandit stronghold. Even though Jiang Pingji testified for the noble ladies, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejin County and Sangzhou. That stain was brought up as a topic of discussion and even a reason to attack her. That was the main reason why Wuxia was struggling. Apart from that, the husband and mother-in-law also believed in what their ancestral homes said. The firstborn child of a woman is of the firstborn male blood. If she wanted to give birth to her husband's child, the first child must be aborted and washed clean. Because of this absurd reason, Wuxia's child was gone. Her husband even said something to her shamelessly. "Since you can give birth, we will have a legitimate son. I don't even despise you for being unclean. Why are you being so sentimental?" Every time Wuxia thought of his face and his words, she felt so disgusted that her stomach churned. She wished she could poke him into a sieve. Son of the first wife. Since then, Wuxia didn't even bother to let her husband stay the night on the 1st and 15th of every month. If he insisted on staying, she would push away the maids who wanted to stand up for him. No matter what, she was disgusted by this man. She wanted to vomit just by looking at him, let alone sharing the same bed. Those women and children? Jiang Pingji saw Wuxia's gloomy face. Wuxia must have recalled some terrible memories. Wuxia was in a good mood. Let's leave it to fate. Lanting has the final say. But if Jiang Pingji remembered correctly, when she first met Wuxia, she was still protecting the women and children in the courtyard. Wuxia snorted softly and said flatly, "If the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. If they were to suffer, a weak woman like me wouldn't be safe either. The situation is different now. Because of our past friendship, you won't humiliate me. But you don't have any friendship with them, and I want my reputation too. Why would I embarrass myself in front of you for a few people I hate so much?" Wuxia and Jiang Pingji's friendship could at most protect her. At least she would have a place to stay in the future. She had nothing to do with those concubines, maids who accompanied her to bed, and sons and daughters of concubines. Why should she keep a string of burdens? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Wuxia saw it all too clearly. Life in the past wasn't going your way, but it will always be good in the future. Growth was accompanied by pain. The more painful it was, the faster one would grow. If her life was a little better, she could more or less keep the romance of her youth, but now she seemed to have accepted everything. Wuxia smiled faintly and her tone was a little light. It's good that we can survive in this chaotic world. I only ask that you bestow me with some kindness and shelter me. Jiang Pingji hadn't seen her old friend for a long time. Wuxia's temperament was to her liking, so they started chatting. The topic still revolved around the past and old friends. Wuxia said, "Except for you and Jingxian, almost none of the people who fell into the bandits' village had a good ending. The former was a lord who dominated a region and killed Wuxia's husband. He could be considered half a benefactor. The latter married into the Feng family of Shangyang. Although she wasn't a member of the royal family, it was said that Feng Jin hadn't taken a concubine for many years after his marriage. He loved his wife and was clean. For women, marrying someone was like marrying Feng Huayu." Jiang Pingji said, "I don't know about others, but Wan is okay." "Wan?" Wuxia murmured, and Shangguan Wan's face appeared in her mind. "I married early, and I vaguely heard that Wan married a short-lived ghost who died early and became a widow. Later she was stolen away. Is this kind of ending considered good? So that's how they explain Wan's disappearance." Jiang Pingji was surprised. She smiled and explained, "Wan wasn't stolen. She followed my subordinate and traveled thousands of miles to Xiangyang district to find me. Now she's married to Han Mei and has a daughter." "Han Mei? My vanguard captain. His surname is Li and his given name is Yun. His courtesy name is Han Mei." After listening, Wuxia let out a long sigh. There was a hint of envy in her voice. She has good luck. Speaking of envy, it was the person in front of her that made her the most envious. He was a lord who dominated a region. If Jiang Pingji hadn't set a precedent, Wuxia wouldn't have thought that a woman could do this. Not long after, Jiang Pingji found out about Feng Zhen's favoritism from Wei Ci. "Iske, beauty is above his head." Wei Ci laughed. "If this beauty can make Zisher change his mind, it's not a bad thing." "Change his mind?" Jiang Pingji looked disgusted. "He'd better not harm others. Make Longzi change his mind?" The difficulty was comparable to the foolish old man moving a mountain. Wei Ci laughed. "If he didn't have the memory of his past life, he would also despise Feng Zhen. Right? Has the matter of the captives been resolved?" Wei Ci said, "We're discussing it." Although it was 60%, quantity didn't mean quality. They had to discuss it slowly. If they got a bunch of old, weak, sick and disabled people, they might as well not have anything. Jiang Pingji said, "Wuxia's deceased husband's wives, concubines, sons and daughters can all be pushed to Bogeo." Wei Ci frowned. "If we do that, Jiang Pingji didn't have a brothel here. She wouldn't allow such a thing to happen, but it was different on Huang Song's side. If the concubines were assigned there, the lucky ones would be taken in as concubines by some low-ranking general. The unlucky ones might become camp prostitutes. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.